What's up, guys? Modern Craftsman Monday here, and this week we have Steve Baczek, who is an architect. You guys probably follow him on Instagram, digging into building science. And this week, the Modern Craftsman is brought to you by Huber Engineered Woods, makers of Advantech subfloor assembly and zip system building enclosure products. Engineered with long-lasting strength, moisture resistance, and nail-holding power, Advantech subflooring is the brand builder's trust for a quality subfloor. Combine the strength and moisture resistance of Advantech panels with the bonding power of Advantech subfloor adhesive for a solid, even subfloor assembly, perfect for the variety of flooring applications. Zip system building enclosure has transformed the way teams build across the country by eliminating the need for house wrap and felt and roof and wall assemblies and providing a rigid air barrier for a tight envelope. It has revolutionized how quickly and easily a high-performance exterior is achieved. A suite of structural and sealing solutions that provide integrated water, air, and thermal control. Zip system builder enclosure products are reducing installation steps while stepping up enclosure performance. If you guys want to learn more about it, huberwood.com.
It is your one-stop sheathing needs.
There we go. So this week, we're talking with Steve Baczek, and we dig into everything but building science, which is exactly how I wanted this first episode with Steve to do. And I say first episode because we're obviously going to have him back on. He left a lot of stones unturned. But you guys also forwarded us a bunch of questions on Instagram. We get to a handful of those at the end of the podcast. And we also dig into him bringing in his daughter and eventually son into the business and how that's going to go from a one-person business to an ultimately three-person business. So let us know what you guys think. How you been?
I've been good, man. Life is good. I getting phone calls every day.
Is it crazy right now? I feel like everyone is in the mode of let's plan and do pre-construction and draw and design and prepare for when this turns around.
Yeah, I mean certainly, and it's like a bunch of things happen. That one, all the projects that guy said, we'll do that in the fall because they were new construction. We're going to tear this down. Now they lost all their remodeling work, and it's like, hey, Steve, can you get these drawings? You want to go for a permit next week? It's like, dude, that's like 80, 100 hours worth of work. And, now you're asking me to do that all in 2 weeks. And it's like you get 2 or 3 of them, and now I got to pick and choose. And they have to wait. So we're working on it. We're working on it, though. But it's crazy. It's always crazy.
Is it still just you?
Yeah, it's just me. My daughter... So my daughter's finishing her master's degree. She'll be done in 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And then she'll come and work for me. My son just is about to finish his second year. And he'll have 3 more to go, and then he'll be able to join.
Was that their choice?
Yeah, they both think life is easy if you're an architect. So.
And you didn't steer them correct?
You know what? I'll tell you what. I know all 3 of you guys love what you do, but I'd argue I love what I do more. So I can't. There's one thing, and we'll talk about it later, that I would choose to do other than this. This would be my number 2 choice.
Why do we have to wait till later?
Jet fighter pilot, man.
Oh, I can do that.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it's like, for real, I was all signed up to go. I was going to go to school, get out, be an officer, go back into the Marine Corps. And then I met my wife. Plan B.
Never too late.
Yeah, not now. all my buddies that I was in with that chose to make it a career, they all retired in like the last 5 years. And like half of them went from, like, they retired on Friday in the Marine Corps, and then Monday they started their new job as a civilian, which was their job when they were in the military. It's exactly the same job, and they're doing the same thing. And now they're getting 2 checks for it, though. So can't beat that.
Did you enlist in the Marine Corps right after high school?
Yeah, I had to get my parents to sign. I went in when I was 17. So they had to sign because I wasn't old enough to sign myself
But
up.
you graduated from high school?
I did. I graduated when I was 17.
Did you go to Paris Island?
Yes. 13 weeks. 3rd
Fun?
Battalion I Company, if you know anything about it.
Is it fun?
You know what? It doesn't seem like it is, but it was a lot of fun. I mean, we had a blast every day. You work your ass off and you're sweating and it's horrible, but you you have to realize that, like, okay, I wake up in the morning, it's like, okay, I'm going to run my ass off today. I'm going to be dog tired. I'm going to do more push-ups than I've ever done today. I'm going to have somebody 2 inches from my face screaming at me all day. And all right, whatever. The guys that freak out are the guys that can't handle that. I mean, I've seen guys take a poke at drill instructors. I saw one guy have this one story. It's pretty embarrassing. He peed his pants climbing the rope because he was like under so much stress. And it's like, me and my buddies are like, how the hell do you recover from that? You're 17 years old. You just got booted out of the Marine for peeing your pants. Like, how do I continue life?
He got booted out for it?
Yeah.
Like,
oh yeah. When like something goes wrong, he was climbing a rope. He couldn't make it all the way to the top. So like one drill instructor started yelling at him, and then that just draws like a pack of wolves. So now there's 5 of them yelling at him, and he started crying. So now like 3 of them went up the rope, and they're like right side by side screaming at him. I thought he was going to fall, and he couldn't do it. And he started crying. He went up there, started screaming. Next thing you know, his pants are like soaking wet and dripping. And they like immediately shut up. They walked him down, walked him back to the barracks. By the time we got back, everything was cleaned up. He was gone. Never saw him again.
Yeah, so it wasn't really because he pissed his pants. It's because he couldn't handle stress.
Well, it's the stress. Yeah, it's the stress.
Where'd you get stationed after that?
So after that, I went to California, and then I went to Hawaii. And we could talk all day long about the Hawaii because I had like the Marine Corps dream job out there. I worked for 4-star Admiral and 3-star General. Drove pretty much, you name the person in the mid to late 80s, aside from the president and vice president. And chances are I met them. I drove the Secretary of Defense, Attorney General, United States, Secretary of the Navy, pretty much every 4-star general or admiral that had anything to do. I used to play golf with the Sting Pack commander. He was a 4-star admiral, and I used to be a fill-in on his foursome because I had my handicap down to like a 3-4 at the time. And so I used to fill in for him. And, you know, according to the ranks, he was probably the, I don't know, number 2 or 3 guy in the U.S. military at the time.
So would you have to do 2 years active
4
and
years
then reserve?
4 years and then 2 years inactive. Yeah.
So
hey, just so you know, I'm not supposed to be taping right now, right?
Yeah, you should be.
Oh.
That's all right. I have your Zoom audio, but yeah, you should record.
Okay. Oh
Sorry.
man, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Audacity.
You know what? I should make that in bold because in the thing I sent you, it says the moment you're on, we're recording. So it's just like we go.
Dude, I'm so sorry, guys.
That's okay.
I record in Audacity. Is that okay?
Yeah, totally.
It's
So
an
we'll
MP3
yeah, we'll
file.
pull that file and then we'll just use the Zoom stuff before
All right,
that.
Sorry.
That's all right.
I know, Johnny. You're saying, what the hell is this guy doing?
I'm always a train wreck when I get started. Every day. It's been 3 years.
So then you did 4 years active and 2 years reserve. Did you stay in after that, or is that when you started your architecture career?
No, I just did 4 years in the Marine Corps, and right after that, you do 2 years in active reserve. So I came out and I actually worked at a number of jobs, and that's where I worked as a framer. I worked as an electrician. I drove a truck for a moving company. Did a fair amount of
just for
jobs.
time frame. When were you considering the Air Force or the fighter pilot?
This was 1988 when I got out. So I graduated high school in 1984, went into the Marine Corps. Graduated June 84, went into the Marine Corps August 84. Got out in August of 88 and worked and was planning on going back to school in August of 89. And that's when plans changed. I ended up going to architecture school in August of 89.
So August 89,
So
what'd you say?
I said Wentworth, baby.
You went?
yeah, went to Wentworth. Yep.
And
Downtown Boston.
is that where you met your wife?
I met her just previous. So I grew up in Western Mass out in the Berkshires, and my wife was going to North Adams State College at the time. So I met her in one of the local pubs.
she swept me off my feet, and the rest is history.
Did you grow up in North Adams? Is that what you said?
I grew up in Adams.
Okay.
Which is like a huge insult if you say, yeah, you're from North Adams.
Yeah,
That's like
my roommate grew up in college, grew up in North Adams, and I drove out there once, and I'm like, man, where am I? It's just incredibly so far out. It seems further than New York, to be honest, and I know it's on the border, but still.
It's right there. Yeah, I mean, it's from my house was probably 15, 20 minutes from the New York border and 10 minutes from Vermont. It's right there in the northwestern corner of the state. And it's right in a valley, so there's a bunch of towns that just string up through the valley. That it's one after the other. It's kind of linear, so.
What was the
you are in the middle of nowhere.
What was the driving factor? You know, I know you met your wife, but what was the driving factor of not going back to be a fighter pilot? And I asked that because my wife's uncle was a fighter pilot, and I mean, dude, I could talk to him all day about his stories and how him and his buddies would just hop in the planes and fly around the sky and crisscross over each other and, you know, fly 2 feet away from each other. It's crazy to think that.
Yeah, one of my detriments. One of my detriments was the general that I worked for had actually 2 officers as aides, and the captain was a fighter pilot and flew F-4s. So he was always showing me all these pictures of his old time buddies and stuff, and we would go over to Cape, which is on the other side of the island in Hawaii, and talk to his old friends, watch, you know, the fighter pilots go. And with the general, I'd be flying out to aircraft carriers and stuff all the time and hanging out, watching ops happening off the top of the flat top and that. But so when I came back, I met my wife, and because of my 4-year displacement and going into the Marine Corps, it was such that we were the same age, but she was graduating college and I was just getting out of the Marine Corps. So she was coming back to Boston and coming to live out here, had a job, etc. And so it's like, well, what do you want to do? And I was like, yeah, I had all these plans, but you know what? I'll just come out to Boston. And she's like, well, what do you want to do? And I said, I don't know. Architecture was always a treat for me, and I liked it. And so I said, okay, let's figure this out, and applied to Wentworth, got in, and the rest is history. And the cool thing about architecture was when I was in high school, I took 4 years of it, which is, for our high school, that was pretty rare. Like, a lot of guys took carpentry, metal shop, that kind of stuff, and I took drafting. So in my 4th year of drafting at high school, I was the only 4th year student, and I don't think he's ever even had one before. And his last name was Goodrich, and we used to call him G-Rat, was his nickname, the teacher. And but anyways, the long story short is G-Rat and I still talk. I mean, I text him probably, you know, once every week or two, and we chat. When I get a project, I have a bunch of projects out in upstate New York, and if I go out there on my way back, I'll set it up, and him and I will go out and grab dinner and stuff, and we'll talk about what I'm doing and this and that. So it's I have I don't know, I place a very high value on, you know, where I came from, who helped me get here, etc. Loyalty is very important, and part of that, I think, is probably the military thing, that, you know, you learn to trust certain people and you learn to not trust certain people, and the ones you trust, it's, you know, the one of the Marine Corps mottos is no better friend, no worst enemy, right? So it's one of those things that, you know, I'm willing to die for you, or I'm willing to shoot you. It's just depends on which route we go.
Steve, what was your what was it like? I have a very similar exposure to architecture. In high school, I did the same thing as you, and that's what exposed me to college and gave me the opportunity to go there. I thought it was weird for me. I would like to know your thought, going from high school to Wentworth, the architecture and your classmates that you're going to school with. Like, what was your exposure to that?
Yeah, I mean, it is a challenge. It was totally different, and you know, there are a couple things for me personally. It's like my second year of architecture school, I probably knew more than my teacher in high school, because he was an industrial arts teacher. He wasn't an architect, right? He was teaching drafting from a book that somebody wrote. But one of the interesting things about architecture school in general is how many people dropped out. I mean, we started out with probably 300 in our freshman year, sophomore year, and then you had to reapply to the school for 50 seats.
Yeah.
So that
for the 5 years
went down significantly, and a lot of it was people just didn't realize. It's funny because people say, "Oh, I'd never make a good architect. I'm not good at math." It's like I had to take calculus, which most people take up through high school. It's not like there's this outstanding math session. It's like, yeah, okay, if you can multiply, read a chart, and maybe do addition and subtraction and division once in a while, you're pretty much good to go. It's there was a ton of reading and writing, which was really surprising to a lot of us.
To that comment about I wouldn't make a good architect, I'm not good at math. Do you think, like today, if someone were to ask you, do you think that architecture is really mathematical, or is it much more
creative?
Yeah, creative, or like
I think it's a lot.
Space.
Yeah, I think it's a lot less mathematical than it's ever been, probably because we have all these specialties that we can rely on, right? I can just say, hey, I want to have this header at this height. I want to take out half of this wall in the back of the house, and hey, John, the structural engineer, figure it out. Let me know how we do it. We got 14 inches to put a beam in there, so just tell me what we got to put in that 14 inches, and I'll draw it in. Where years ago you probably weren't doing that, and it's it's one of those things where I love what I do, but I'm not really high on my profession. And I'm not high on my profession because we really relinquish a lot of our duties. A lot of architects do. And I'm not saying all of them, and I'm not saying that I run out and do every structural calculation, because I don't. I have a very good structural engineer that he does a great job. But, there's architects that hire building scientists, actually, for doing design reviews and stuff. And it's like, come on, guys, you can't. You're a professional, and you can't put a wall assembly together. And it's not even that it's a complex one. It's like, hey, I don't want to do that. I'll pawn that off on the client. We'll hire this third-party building consultant. He'll do a design review and tell us how we can put the wall together. And then I don't have to worry about it.
John, you talked about that too in the building side. It's like, as general contractors, we do less and less than back in the day. It was you were setting foundation, and you were bringing it down to the interior trim.
And now I'm just romantic.
And now you're romantic.
Is it a liability thing? I mean, it's got to be a liability thing as to why they don't want to be doing that stuff.
I think it's one of those things. Like, let me. I'm really good at kind of flipping the script and giving analogies based on what I think you do, right? So if I told you never had to do demo again, and you could just do finish work, would that be happy? Would you be happy with that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So as an architect,
but liability-wise, demo.
Yeah. But as an architect, if you come at me and say, hey, instead of doing 5 projects this year, if you did 7, but all you got to do was design them and do 3D modeling and pick out colors and faucets and trim and all of that good stuff, and we can rely on somebody else to actually do the construction drawings, would you be okay with that? Then I think a lot of architects would say, sure, please sign me up. I like to do that. I've had people, architects, like email me details or saying something, and I say, yeah, I probably wouldn't do it that way. Oh, well, could you draw the way you do it for me? I'm like, no, I'm not going to send you the detail. I want you to go out of business.
Zero mercy.
I'm thinking like someone.
That's one of my first takeaways from Steve. Zero mercy.
So Johnny, you'll love this. You'll greatly appreciate this. I don't know. It was probably, I was in the Marine Corps about 14 months, and this big, he was bigger than me, and gunnery sergeant. And he says, I'm gonna let you in on a secret of life. He goes, anybody you meet, you got to get them to believe that you're just as comfortable shaking their hand as you are punching them square in the face. And he said, that's the secret. He goes, that's how you get respect. That's how, people look up to you. Said,
I'm trying to connect the dots there, and it doesn't feel like a logical transition from one to the other.
From what?
You have to be just as comfortable shaking their hand as punching them in the face.
Well, I guess the moral of the story is that like it's that no better friend, no worst enemy. Like I can shake your hand and I can be your friend, or you can piss me off and I can punch you square in the face. So always be on your toes because it really doesn't matter to me.
Do you know Jeff Gray, Steve?
No, the name is
okay.
not familiar.
Jeff Gray from Structural Wood Systems, giving him a shout out. He gave me a shirt I think 5 years ago, and it said "Bring back the punch in the face." It was down the sleeve of the shirt, his company shirt, and on the sleeve it said "Bring back the punch in the face."
There you go.
And I was like, "How do you put this out there?"
Yeah,
It just set the tone.
There's some guys out there that have not a problem. I mean, I'm probably not as comfortable as some guys. I've had some friends that it was absolutely no problem, certainly. But
I feel like you grow. I think you grow out of that.
Yeah,
I had a lot of friends too.
I'm a lover, not a fighter. But yeah, I mean, again back to your original question, Tyler. I think it's if you're given the easy road and not asked to pursue, the things that you don't want to do. People kind of give up on those tasks, right? I don't want to do demo. I don't want to do this or that. And
I just think maybe I guess today things have changed, but when I think architecture, it's not necessarily putting those finishes together and everything else. I feel like it's the composition structurally and aesthetically of a house, and it kind of encompasses all of that. And it's strange to me to hear that people getting into it, at that point, it's like, why are you going to school for architecture? Just become a designer, like an interior designer.
Yeah. I mean, well, because they want the title architect. I guess there is some, there's some kind
prestige.
of hoopla that's attached to having that title. But yeah, I mean, it's, I had a really good builder friend out in Western Mass. He's actually the one that I worked with when I got out of school. I went to high school with him, and when I got out of the Marine Corps, I went and worked with him for a little bit. But he would always tell me a story. I'd go up there, we'd go out drinking and stuff when I go up there to visit him. But he would always roll out a set of drawings and say, "Hey, you got a few minutes to go through these drawings with me?" And I was like, "Sure." And so we'd sit there and go through the drawings, and I'd start marking up things and say, "Hey, you got to go back to the architect and tell him you need more information here, you need more here." He goes, "Oh, I can't do that." And I'm like, "What do you mean you can't do that? There's those details aren't there." And he's like, "No, they're expecting me to just build this. If I go back to them and become a headache, they won't put me on the bid list anymore." So it's kind of sad.
So he was asking for you to basically dissect the.
Yeah, and help them put things together because, like, hey, should I do this? Should I do that? And it's crazy. I mean, I'll give you another story. Go ahead.
You said that you don't get high on your profession. What do you mean by that?
That I'm not. I just don't hold it in as high esteem as maybe the general public does. Because I think we're really failing in some respects that we don't, You
mean your industry, not necessarily you individually.
Not me individually. No, the architectural profession as master builder. It's I jokingly tell some people, it's like I have some architect friends I want to let design a doghouse for me because they couldn't figure out how to frame it. And but yet they're doing $1 million buildings and shuffling papers in an office in Boston, and it is what it is. I mean, every profession has the same thing. I'm sure of it. But it's one of those things that just don't expect me to get all high on it. That this firm won all these awards or did this and did that. It's just I'm not keyed in on that.
Steve, if you think that people are delegating more of the structural, do you think that there's something being lost in knowing that part of the business? Because I just think of like, I can't be as creative if I don't know what my limitations are with structural and the openings and stuff like that, where, I think a lot of stuff, we talked about this before, it gets pedaled down to associates, obviously not with your firm, which is what I love, but a lot of it is a young assistant or not an apprentice but an associate who can't understand structural, so doesn't know that, so they have to kick that over to somebody else, and that design process becomes crazy long because it's not all in house anymore. It's like, let me draw this, let me kick it to the engineer, let me see if that works, then come back to me.
And it's really interesting, John, because I do get some clients and they say, well, we're this is kind of a big house or whatever, and we're kind of in fear that it's just you. It's like, this other firm here has 8 people. I said, okay, let's run through 2 scenarios. I design this house. I do all the construction drawings. We put them in for permit. The contractor's out there and he has a question. And he calls me. Guess what? I probably have that dimension memorized or pretty darn close to it. He goes to the other firm that has 8 people. Joe owner has to call Joe project manager, who then, asks Joe drafter to bring it up on the screen so they can try and interpret why that dimension is that dimension and how do you change it and how do you go from there. I can walk the site with the project manager, and I'm doing this, really good size house now, and the project manager is just superb, but we have this ultimate respect for each other because, he asks a question, I give him the answer, and sometimes I ask him, what are we thinking here? Is there a better way to do this? And, I respect his knowledge also. So it's an awesome team. Awesome team.
But couldn't the argument be that with a firm with 8 people, they can work more efficiently and quicker, or they're getting more information down in the drawing, so those questions are limited because their bandwidth isn't stretched?
So I worked at a couple firms before I actually went out on my own, and the process goes something like somebody goes to a meeting, comes back with a bunch of red lines, they give it to a person who then distributes those red lines. Mm-hmm. Somebody makes the red lines, they get checked by the first level person, and then they get checked by the upper level person, and then they go back into the meeting as changes next week, and then those things happen. With me, I make the change and send it back to them.
But that other firm is also thinking they're value engineering it because it's not the high dollar person making these incremental small changes. I mean,
right,
Nick,
but you have 5 people looking at it for 15 minutes. So
yeah, I know. And Nick, there's a way I think about this. Yeah, I love certain size firms that can handle the work, but I think we've all had those companies. Like I've had an electrician company a decade ago that came in, and every day they would just send me a different truck. Yeah, so it was like Groundhog Day every time someone walked in, and then it's like asking an electrician who roughed the house not come finish it. Mm-hmm. And the headaches that come along with that, if just having one person that knows what's going on. And Steve, that's why I think I gel with that a lot, because I like being lean. I like to be able to, if you're getting somebody, you're getting me on the phone.
But again, and just for the sake of arguing it, it's that you're compiling larger firms into all of them, operating in that manner. All of them operating in the sense of always sending a different electrician, where the other firm that has 100 electricians might have their shit together, and you get the same team every time. So I mean, I'm not necessarily disagreeing with you guys. I like I do have an appreciation for, especially Steve, like the amount of projects that you do and being that the only person to go to. But I think for the conversation, it's, it really depends, because there could be a single guy out there that does spread himself too thin, that when that project manager calls him, it says, I don't have time, I'm already on to another project, where I wouldn't bundle you in with that guy because he's a single person firm. Just like I can't bundle in a 100-person electrician firm with another one just because they have the equal amount of people.
Yeah, I mean it is there's certainly a challenge. There's certainly an argument for it, but it's I have my daughter coming on, and truth be told, I won't say it's going to be a challenge, but there's going to be some questioning moments because I don't trust many people because I never had a need to, right? I've been drawn by myself for, 18 years, 20 years, even more, because even when I was at Building Science Corporation, I pretty much did all the drawing for them. So if a detail came out of there in the 90s, it was my drawing. So it's arguably for the last 25 years, I've I've never had somebody draw for me, and I've never really had people check my work. It's been me.
What's your goal with your daughter, or what's your daughter's goal?
So
like what role will she fill now and in 5 years from now?
So the beauty of time is such that I get the opportunity now to get some pretty interesting projects, and those drive some pretty interesting clients, interesting builders, etc. But I still get the occasional phone call of there's some builders that I have worked with that I'm extremely loyal to that still, hey, Steve, I have this garage with a room above that these people want to put out, in their backyard, a detached garage or whatever. Can we do that? I'm sure. Because it's that loyalty thing, right? They knew me. They gave me every one of their jobs 15 years ago. I'm not going to say, yeah, I really don't do that anymore. So I bang it out for them. So the beauty of having my daughter come on is we can kind of revive all of that stuff, and that would basically pay her salary, because there have been times where I've priced myself out of some projects just to get the people to say, yeah, we're going to go in a different direction. It's like, fine, because I can't really take that job on. And but having her, it allows me to take that job on. They're somewhat low risk because I can probably do those in my sleep, and I can just watch over her. And then, oh, by the way, she can help me when it's crunch time. It's like, hey, put that stuff aside, help me for 2 days, and let's get these plans out, and teach her how to do foundation plans and all this. We have a joke because now we share the office, and I always look over at her and I say, Lexi, I said, I can't wait for the day I never have to do another electrical plan. And she's like, I hate you.
What is it with electrical plans, and like you guys
they
don't
are
like?
So I mean,
But you guys don't like drawing them.
I can do a framing plan. I can do building sections. I can blow through them. Friggin' electrical plans, man. For a 3,000 square foot house, that's like 3 hours of floor. There's just so many pieces. There's just so many pieces to put in, like all the outlets, cable, doorbell,
and it's all a suggestion. Because I don't use any of it. And it's all a
suggestion because you're going to walk through and we're going to change it all. But we have
John's
to
like,
get
somewhere. No.
Yeah,
I just want to walk it and like, I'm a righty. Should the switch be like? I'm weird.
Yeah, it's. I wasn't saying yeah, you're weird, but
it's all right.
It's yeah, they're just, I don't know. They're certainly not the funnest things.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in a few positions where I've reached out to like an architect on a project. I'm like, hey, are you guys going to do a lighting layout or an electrical plan? And I always get the same response. I mean, if you guys need one. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, I need one. Just,
why do you need it? For a baseline for pricing?
So, I mean, a lot of times it's pricing. Some projects, like our Western project right now, it's an extremely complicated one. So that one actually came with one. So we didn't ask, but
yeah, because they value it because of the design. It's wrapped around the design. I get that.
Right.
It's a lot of times.
Usually it's just pricing. It's like I need to, if we're gonna price something and we're in the preliminary design, I need something to go off of.
Yeah, I mean, I like to do, honestly, half the time I bring in a designer because they have a better idea of scale and lighting and what needs to happen in that space.
Yeah.
The dogs.
Are those your dogs howling?
Yeah, so, the Great Danes.
Is it? I thought that was my kid.
I thought it was Tyler's kids too.
No, and I have to lock them up when I do podcasts and stuff. Excuse me. And so they're locked up in their crates downstairs. And
they're just letting you know.
I thought you were downstairs.
Let me. No, yeah, I'm in the basement.
Those people behind you. Those people behind you haven't moved yet.
They're very, very good workers. Very static. But
so you said your son is in college now, right?
Yeah, he's in his second year of Auburn.
And will he kind of fulfill the roles that your daughter is in now, and kind of just you guys continue to grow up?
It's actually the perfect timing because I basically told my daughter, I said, you come on board this summer and then you got 3 years to learn as much as you can so that when my son graduates and comes on board, you're going to train him. I'm not going to train him. You are. And, so, I mean, I'll still be there. I love my kids and I'll work with them forever.
Are you looking to step back from the work some at that point?
Not necessarily step back, but like in my early example, I'm going to do a hell of a lot less demo and a lot more finish work, right? And I mean, I have a pretty prolific, lecture series and all of that stuff. So I could travel around the country, go to conferences, give a few lectures, and generate work doing it. When I'm out there, I'm meeting people, and they're always asking, "Hey, do you want to come out this way and do work?" So
Heckle us at our talks.
Heckle you guys? I don't heckle you, man. I was just asking some intelligent questions, trying to get the crowd.
I was actually in my head just thinking that to go from supporting and creating jobs for one person now to 3 would probably be overwhelming, but if they're your children, you've probably been supporting them this entire time anyway, so it's just kind of switching.
Yeah, finally they get to do something. One of the biggest things is with all my traveling, one of the downfalls of that is that when I leave the office, nothing gets done. Right? So by now having my daughter on board, even if it doesn't have to be, those wall section details or whatever, but it's like, hey, I'm going to be gone for 2 days. We have these 2 houses that these existing conditions need to get drawn up. So draw those up, build a 3D model of it in SketchUp, have it ready, and when I come back, we'll design or, do a couple layouts, and when I come back, we'll discuss them.
Why can't you work remotely?
I can, but when we travel, it's more like, you
have
rush to the airport, you land, somewhere in Denver or Texas, and you go to the hotel, you're tired, you wake up, you have breakfast, you lecture all day, and then I get on a plane and fly to the next city.
Sure.
Same thing, and then that night catch the plane home. I get home at 1 a.m, now it's Friday morning. It's like, okay, time to catch up.
So you've done 207 lectures, I think? The website said?
The website, yeah.
Yeah, it's probably something like that. I mean, we do probably 40, 50 a year or something like that.
How did that start?
So it's funny because my very first lecture, I remember it distinctly. I was at Building Science Corporation, and Joe, he's probably one of the more famous lecturers of our industry. We were down south, I believe it was Mississippi, and we were talking about a project, and I was working on it. It was a demonstration project. And he got about halfway through it, and he said, "You know what?" He goes, "Steve really has a really good handle on this project. He's been working on it. Why don't you come up here and say a few words?" And I was like, okay. But then it hit me. I was like, okay, I can do this. I can handle it. And guess what? If I can't handle it, I got Big Joe in the back of the room that he'll step in when he realizes. And
never mind, Steve doesn't have it.
Yeah, nobody's going to try and embarrass you if he's in the room and he's the one that called upon you, So, and then from there, it was kind of like part of working at Building Science Corporation was sharing the knowledge. And, they had a bunch of DOE contracts and such. And in those, it was. I mean, I would go to conferences to go because we had to have someone from the office at that conference representing that conference and listening to what they say. So some of them.
For those that don't know, what is Building Science Corp?
Building Science Corp. It's a building science company that is headed up by Joe Stiebrick. He's got a PhD in building science. Lived in Canada many years ago. Came down to the United States. Started Building Science Corporation with his wife and partner, Betsy Pettit, who's a registered architect. And they basically do building science consulting, right? And a lot of buildings investigations, which were always really fun. I tell people that's kind of where I got my master's degree and PhD, was walking into a building with Joe and knowing we were going to spend the next day or two there taking the building apart to understand why it failed, which was just, it doesn't get much better than that.
I'm going to make an assumption here. Is this where you got the name for your podcast?
No, the Unbuilder podcast. No, Peter worked for Building Science Corporation too. I don't know if you guys know that, but Peter Yost worked there for a number of years, as well as his brother Nathan worked there too. And so we became really good friends, and we used to do a bunch of work together. We used to travel around together. And but when we were searching for the name, we were trying to figure out, okay, if we're going to talk about kind of concepts of building science and take buildings apart, then what do we do? And we came up with the Unbuild It. Peter wanted to call us the Three Stooges or something. Yeah.
I listened to it.
This is crazy. I wanted to go with Three Cool Tools, but
yeah.
they didn't like that. So,
well, I think, I mean, the reference to, going into a building and doing the investigation and taking a building apart to understand where it failed, that's where I think there was a post about your podcast talking about the Unbuild It podcast and how it is to understand it, how the system works. And one of the best ways to figure out how something works is to take it apart. Especially if it fails.
Yeah, definitely. And like I said, those years of walking around with Joe and doing building investigations were, they were as valuable as any day in my life, towards my career and success and in understanding. And it kind of baffles me too, because I tell, some builders in that they start going in there, they demo and tear things apart, and they just rip it apart and don't pay attention. I tell them, I said, listen, you pull the drywall off, just step back from the wall, take a few pictures, and then go home and look at it. And when you look at it, look for wetting patterns. Look for where were things rotted, where did things get wet, leave a stain behind. And you'll really get a story of how that building got tortured for the last 50 or 60 years. And that'll help you understand now in where are the important pieces to come back, right? And that's kind of what Peter and I and Jake are going to are talking about. But it's funny because, with Instagram, I sit back and I see all these posts and I see this and I go, oh my God, that's a waste of time, because it's, you're not going to, that's not where you worry about water. This is where you worry about water. And that's where they fail to place any care. So it's, you got to take advantage of every minute. And if you're taking, I love, when we're doing old projects and redoing them and they're demoing, I make sure I get out there a couple times during demo week just to walk around. And that's what I do. I'll take a bunch of pictures and then I'll go home and look at the pictures. And that's what I'm looking for. If you want to understand water management on a big rainstorm, go out, look at a commercial building, walk around, take pictures around the windows, take pictures at the corners, take pictures where the roof meets the wall, and look what's happening. You'll notice that the corners get a hell of a lot more wet than the field of the wall, the bottom of the windows.
I think it was you and Matt, and I think we were walking in Boston or something, and we were looking at the building, and you guys made the reference of the corners are always made out of a different material, or the brick looks different because it's been replaced, because that's the first point of failure. Yeah. You oftentimes see the granite, corners, mm-hmm. and then the brick tie into it because the field doesn't see as much water. And the moment that was pointed out, it's like now every time I walk by a commercial building, it's the first thing you look at because you understand it. You understand that.
Or you see all those stone profiles and you say, "Oh wow, that's a really fancy building." Yeah, it is a really fancy building, but that fancy profile is to push the water off the wall and have it drip away so it doesn't run down the wall, right? So
your dogs.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I keep texting my daughter and say, "Shut them up." It's the problem is like they just got fed, so they're pretty active. In about an hour, they'll both be like dead to the world, and you won't be able to get them up.
No worries.
And I have a little pup, and he's the pain in the ass. The 2-year-old.
He's not that little, is he?
No, he's 8 months, and he's 135, 140 pounds.
Jesus.
Yeah, that's not little.
Yeah, he's a little horse. So, and he is strong as hell. Oh my God, especially on carpet. I can wrestle with him on tile, but carpet, he can dig in those paws. His paws are bigger than my hands, and
oh my gosh.
Yeah, he can dig them in.
So going back to the lectures and the presentations, you kind of were brought into it, I would say almost by accident with Joe. He kind of put you on stage, and then from there it just kind of snowballed, and you realized
and it just kind of snowballed. I mean, Betsy or Coda and Joe would go speak at Build Boston or something, and they'd be like, "Hey, why don't you come and you do the section on water management or thermal management or something?"
At what point did you say to yourself, this is something I want to do? Because
it was probably closer to the beginning than it was anything. I mean, it is pretty enjoyable to get up and it's not so much that it's me lecturing and playing teacher. I think it's more of, this is an opportunity to have a conversation with 80 colleagues at one time. And we get to really rap on building science and stuff, because somebody out there is going to ask a question that's going to be pretty interesting, and someone's going to ask the kind of not so interesting question. We'll throw out the quick answer, and then we'll move on until we get the real interesting one, and then we'll have a little jam session. But you really, the thing that I found, and it's true, I'm sure you guys have heard it, but when, especially as carpenters, when you're forced to explain how to do something, you learn from your own explanation.
Right.
So true.
Right. You don't know this. I mean, a lot of my education is born of the idea and the concept of me having to explain it. Mm-hmm. And and I do get complimented on it. It's like, hey man, I saw that video, or I saw that. It was really good, really interesting. You really broke it down into these common concepts. And Joe was the master of that. And I like demo. When Joe would speak, I'd sit in the back of the room and I would pay attention to how people react, pay attention to how, how does he deliver this information? And Joe had such a knack where he could take PhD level building science and bring it down to like a water cooler conversation with the plumber. And I'm not coming down on plumbers, so don't start thinking I'm coming down.
You're 100% right.
But I'm just saying, he had the ability to take it down to this common denominator and just say, this is what we're really talking about. All the rest is fancy math. But this is the problem. There's a hole here. There's a force here. It's pushing the water through that hole. It's creating a problem here. Yeah, you can go back and you can play games with the F forces and all of this. But the reality is it's raining out there. The water's getting in here. How is it doing that?
There's something about how I've been at a few of his presentations and how he talks about it. And then as soon as he's talking about the slides that come up, totally relate to what's happening for people that are like trying to wrap it around in their head. And then they see it and they're like, oh my goodness. I mean, there's so many projects that, I don't know if I have it right anymore because I haven't seen him in a long time, but he would use like his projects in his own house as like a guinea pig on what was happening, because the same way I do at my house with products, it's like he was doing that for building science.
Oh yeah,
it was kind of
Dow truck back up a few times, and all those things happen. But that's how you learn too, and that's how companies learn, right? Yeah. I mean, we use Matt as an example too. Matt gets some materials, he throws it on there, but if you don't think these insulation companies aren't getting kind of a soft recall knowledge of what's going on, and you can go online and find out, are people favoring your product? If they're not favoring it, why are they not favoring it? What can we do to change it? What kind of direction do we need to take this rigid insulation? Who's complaining about what? How do we make it a better product? There's no better way than to get 50,000 views in 24 hours and people commenting on it. So it's worth every penny of just giving him a truckload of that stuff.
Yeah, I think that's what I think a lot of people get confused by that. In a big way, it can be misconstrued as just product placement and promoting a product because it's free, but where that's not the real reason behind it. The reason behind it is to share the good and bad of it. What works, what doesn't, and how do you make the best out of a particular product? And it's not it's not, and also not coming in saying this is the best product.
Right.
Being open to the fact that this is an experiment in many ways, in from a science a science man or a building science manner, but also an experiment amongst the people that are viewing it and understanding it and and conversating over it.
Right. And I think it's it's the leadership example too, right? So I always use the analogy of, okay, you get that gym membership, you walk in the door. There's, Joe Buff here who looks like he just got off the bodybuilding stage. And then there's this guy over here eating a donut, right? That's a little roly-poly. And they both say, hey, we can both train you. Which one are you going to pick? right? You're probably not going to pick the donut guy unless you absolutely don't care. So
what kind of donuts?
Yeah, I like chocolate covered with sprinkles.
Oh, here, double chocolate.
Someone write that down.
Just saying.
But the reality is we need people, and I think Joe paved the way for that. But we need people that do extreme stuff, because when I go into the gym, I don't want to become a bodybuilder, but I like to have his knowledge because he looks like he's been around the block and he can answer pretty much any question that I'll have. So if I get to 30 or 40% of where he's at, I'm going to be a really happy camper and be what I consider a fit person. So I'm always discouraged. And if you ever, I know everybody's busy, but if you ever want to have fun, Matt, especially when I do videos, I'll go on there and YouTube, people get to post comments. And man, I just have at it. I just let loose on people because it's like they say, "Oh, this is dumb. Oh, that costs too much money." And I was like, "Oh, here we go, another unsubstantiated comment of where we're only worried about costs." And I just, beat up the people. But the last one he did, I actually preempted it because I went on there and wrote a long paragraph and said, "Hey, Matt, I just wanted to commend you on the leadership role that you take. That I realize that this roof you're building in your whole house, it's out of the norm. It probably exaggerates building science to the nth degree, and a lot of people can't do it. But you're not asking everybody to do it. What you're trying to show them that there's different concepts in the way to build, and there are better ways to build. As professionals, it's our responsibility to take that information and kind of recycle it into our work and figure out how can we make our product a little bit better by using his leadership."
Steve, I got to commend you on that, because the reference to the gym and a bodybuilder and looking to them for advice, that's a great example and really kind of helps explain what Matt is doing with his house, right? But also helps really, like, everyone, anyone that you see that is, I'm going to use the word successful, whether it's bodybuilding, whether it's building homes, whether it's, racing cars. It's you always look to, or racing bikes, like, Lance Armstrong, you always look to them first. It's like, if I could get to him, then I could be a better bike rider.
Yeah.
And you always look for those extreme examples. So I think that, I don't know, I wanted to commend that, because that makes it, that really relates it to kind of everything we do in life, is we're always looking to the person that holds the highest status for whatever we want to achieve as a goal. Knowing that in some way it might not be obtainable, but if I watch Tom Brady throw a football 3,000 times, I could probably throw a football better.
Yeah. No, definitely. You pick up on those nuances, and you don't have to do exactly what they're doing. You just need to understand that there's this road that I can go down that I've never been down before, that maybe I should just take a look. And that's all I said in that one comment was, everybody is so hyped on, well, I wonder how much that cost a square foot. Oh my God, what a waste of money that is. And it's like, look at guys. I understand. We all have budgets. Even the projects where we think they don't have a budget, they still have a budget. They place a value on certain things. But before we question the budget question, let's think about, what is he doing, why is he doing it, and does it work successfully, and is there any opportunity for me to use that? That's how you can become successful. Yeah. Right? I mean, Jake did a post the other day. One of my favorite comments is, if I build the second house the same way I built the first house, I'm not doing my job as a professional, right? Because I should have learned something from the first one. I should have been able to intellectually evaluate it and take the things that didn't quite work, or have found a new way to do something and move it into the next way, right?
True.
I think that so many of those comments too are those people basically justifying as to why they aren't doing things a certain way.
Yep.
It's an excuse. It's budget, or it's time, or it's customers, or it's location, where it's easier for them to basically resist or stand up against what somebody else is doing, so they don't have to look at themselves.
Yeah, that's the person that sits in the donut shop saying, yeah, those gym memberships, they're really expensive, and I ain't got time for that.
Pretty much.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm going to bring in the hockey scenario here, is that there's different types of people.
It's been a minute.
I know it has been a minute. But no, I mean, I've had friends that have been really good, and they've had opportunities to go to different teams. And you can either stay in a team and be a star and be surrounded by mediocre people, or you can go play on a team that's amazing, and your growth during that time frame will be unreal. But how you grow with a team that is mediocre, you'll play down to that level. So, I'd rather play on a team that's always challenging me and taking that challenge, so then whatever comes my way, I'm ready for it, not just to be stagnant and just be like, all right, I just appreciate that people look up to me. That's crap.
Right. It's even the reference of, I don't know how the saying is, but it's like you're the average of the 5 people you hang out with. Yeah. And I think about that from like a business standpoint. And, I've attended lectures from a business standpoint in marketing and sales. And I purposely put myself in a room of people. Someone said it to me actually great, is that if you're in a room of people that make you feel uncomfortable, you're in a good spot.
Perfect.
And that was the thought process, is that I want to be around people that are world class at what they do. Here's my opportunity to do that. And I think that, bringing back, Steve, to the lecture talk, you mentioned that it was really about the fact that you could have conversation with 80 people, 80 of your colleagues, and a question would come up that was a good one, and everyone would learn. I'm going to make the assumption that you probably started the podcast for the same reason that we started it, is we were sick of having the conversation between the 3 of us and then not sharing that. Yeah. Because the 3 of us would, talk, and all of a sudden there'd be some really good point, and we were like, man, if we could just share that. And now we have the opportunity, and kudos to you guys, because we know how hard it is to run the podcast, and you guys to jump in and share a completely different side of this industry, which is building science, which the 3 of us I would say are novices at, and some John, you probably have the most experience out of it, but to bring that level of education to it is really cool.
But we everybody, all of us, it's like, I think part of it is ingrained in who you are, certainly. And when 3 guys like yourselves, or 3 guys like Peter, Jake, and I set ourselves apart to do a podcast or establish some leadership role, then what we're basically saying, I think, is, hey guys, we have a little information, but we're really on a deep search here. Like, I'm uncomfortable just sitting here and doing the same thing I did yesterday. And I want to talk about the next level stuff. And it doesn't have to be building science. I listened to Gary Katz's thing. I texted him today and said what a great job, the podcast was with you guys, and how I really enjoyed it and stuff. And, I had the opportunity at one of the fine home building dinners at IBS a handful of years ago. Like, we walked in, and then there just happened to be an empty seat. I sat down, and I was like, hey, I'm Steve Baczek. And he's like, oh, I'm Gary Katz. And I was like, oh, I didn't even know what the hell he looked like. And then it's like, all of a sudden, it's like, now I'm sitting next to the guy for 3 years, and for 3 hours. And, it's like, hey, so the whole Katz Roadshow and this and that. And, and just hearing his stories and stuff. And it's like, here's a guy that, can cut crown molding in his sleep and freaking make it look unbelievable. And, I get the opportunity to sit down with him. And it's like, you don't have to sit down with him and talk about crown molding. He's a successful person. You can sit down and talk to him about how to be successful. It's, was it like 2 or 3 years ago, my kids were big swimmers. My son was at some national championship down in Texas. We're down there. And the guy from Texas, which is the #1 swim school in the country, but the head coach was sitting behind us. I forget it. Reese was his name. And I looked at him. I was like, hey, man, that's, I forget his first name, but so-and-so Reese. And my wife is like, yeah. She's like, don't say anything to him. I'm like, what do you mean don't say anything to him? It's like, that's like going to a football game, having Bill Belichick sit next to you, and it's like, I can't talk to the guy? Hell no. This guy's like top of the game. I'm getting my ass back there, and I'm asking him all kinds of questions. What is he looking for in a swimmer? What do you see? What do you do here? Right? And it's not about that, hey, I'm going to change careers and become a swim coach. It's, how do I understand success, right? What's the point? What makes him so damn good? And it's like what makes Gary Katz so damn good at what he does. And I think that's the important parts of, when you guys come out and you have these people that are really good at what we're doing. And it's like, I don't want to learn how to be a tile guy, but I want to understand what it means to be successful. And how do we do that? I think that's really important.
I think Gary did a good job of shaping and cultivating that conversation about his successes and failures, and not necessarily the hands-on execution or application of carpentry.
Yeah, and it's you can't expect to be in that kind of business and go for the amount of time that he went and not necessarily have a bad day or bad week or bad month or bad year. It's going to happen. It comes with the territory, right? I mean, we're all going to experience it too, one way or another. We're going to have a bad week, bad client, bad project, something. You can't be in this business and not, have just roses every day. That doesn't exist.
Someone just took a lawnmower over the roses.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. I drove their riding lawnmower right through the rose bed. And
I was going to ask this later, but you kind of queued it up. Can you elaborate on your worst client experience?
Worst client experience. I mean, I'll give you
like names and numbers.
Yeah,
names
there you
and
go.
Numbers.
So get your notepad out. But I'll give you the worst non-client experience first, which was going to look at a job. And it was up on the North Shore. 2 clients, husband and wife. I sit down at the table and. They start talking, and the husband goes, "Okay, why don't you just tell them what we're thinking?" And so she starts rattling off a bunch of things, and he looks at her and goes, "Where the hell's that coming from?" She's like, "What do you mean?" He was like, "You never said any of that shit before." And within like 2 minutes, they're dropping F-bombs. He's swearing at her, and I'm sitting there literally looking over my shoulder like there's got to be a candid camera here because there's no way this is for real. And they just went at it, and I was like, whoa, hey guys. I was like, I think there's probably, and it was kind of funny because I'm like, I think there's some things that you guys probably need to clear up before we can have a real effective conversation here. And I said, I'm just going to head out. Give me a call back when you think you guys have this figured out. But like, he totally went off the rails on her, and she fought right back. And I was like, oh my God, how do I like?
How did you get that lead?
I don't even know. It was probably like a friend of somebody's or something,
Therapist.
Call that friend and say, listen, I'll give my name out to those people.
We're going to marriage counseling, and our counselor was throwing us a bunch of referrals.
Yeah, don't go that route. I mean, one of the worst client experience. I mean, some of the challenges I have as a single person and with the traveling is timing, and trying to get projects out, and it's so much that. It's not necessarily that it's taking longer, but you guys have probably heard me say, we could call ourselves plumbers, we can call ourselves carpenters, architects, engineers, whatever, but we're really expectation managers, right? Mm-hmm. That's what we do. As the general contractor, someone comes to you, signs a contract, gives you a bunch of money, and then they expect a certain product delivered. And as an architect, same thing. They sign a contract, they give me a bunch of money, and they expect certain things delivered. And when they don't get them on their expectations, and sometimes it's because the expectations aren't necessarily laid out. It's not that you were late or this took longer. It's just you never explained to them that, okay, I'm going to go away, and it's going to probably take me 3 or 4 weeks to do this, and I'll get back to you. And so those kinds of, it's hard to recover sometimes from those bad expectations because the minute you kind of get labeled as, this shit ain't coming out, we're not going to get that on time. Oh boy, here we go. It's like, then you've been labeled as that you can't deliver, and it becomes somewhat problematic.
What does your contract or kind of scope of work look like as far as post design meetings and all of that stuff? Are you designing to a level that minimizes on-site meetings, or is that an add-on after the fact, or is that kind of included in your design package?
So most of my projects, especially now, I used to do them as a lump sum, or as a guaranteed price. But now I've moved into, because part of it is the industry and my expectations of clients is that they can't clearly define what they really want to save their lives, right? So I tell them, I say, listen, this is what I'm going to charge an hour. This is the price range that I think you will be in, given, historic precedents. If you can't make a decision and, to save your life, then we're going to be drawing all day. And, one of the things that I tell my clients to kind of set expectations, which I think is good advice, is I tell them every question I ask you, I want it answered honestly, confidently, and expediently. And I want them answered in that order, right? Don't answer the question if you can't answer it honestly. If you don't think you know what you want to do, then just say, well, I have to think about this. If you can't be confident about it. You get a lot of clients that just hurry up and they feel like, oh, I need to push this process along, and they answer quickly. And those are the ones that end up costing a lot more time. And it's baffling to me. One of the other things that I always like to talk about, which is, you guys can all three can probably relate to pretty easily, and a lot of the listeners. It's this whole like bidding thing. When clients come to me and I have this conversation, when we're sitting at the table, when they're signing me up, and I tell them, I said, there's a couple ways to do this project. We can work together, and then we can do a set of drawings. We can put it out to bid, and you can get 3 or 4 bidders, and you're going to get a number, and you can move on. But if you asked me what the 5 most successful projects I ever did, then I would say they're ones where I walked in the door with the builder. And we understood what your expectations were. We understood the expectations from a financial point of view, as in, I have X amount of dollars. I can probably climb up to this number, but I cannot absolutely not go over that number. I've even stopped asking clients, do you have a budget? I used to ask if they have a budget, but they always lie, right? So now I come at them.
Always.
So now I come at them. I say, do you have a number that absolutely scares you? And they're like, what do you mean? I said, a number that scares you. Like, if we're going to put this addition on, if the first number is a 5 and I'm not talking 50 grand, does that scare you? And he's like, hell yeah. I want that first number to be a 2 or 3. I said, okay, now we're beginning to understand the expectations here. So that being said, you either need to double your 2 or 3, or you need to take what you and your wife want to do and cut it in half. But that's the only way that you're going to get there.
But Steve, my problem with that is, I mean, I love it. What I want to do is understand it better. Is that how do people understand that you're not just trying to squeeze as much money out of them as possible? I feel like that's what happens a lot of times, not with this group of people or maybe even the listeners, but there are people out there.
Well, I guess then, because what I do is to battle that, John, is I come right at them with how I could potentially be a criminal, right? So I can say, listen, I said, I'm not trying to blow smoke here. I think this project is validly $500 or $600K. Now, as an architect, I could give you my contract. I could sign it. I could tell you it's a $250K project all day long. And then draw it up, cash your checks, run away with them, and then when you get the 3 bids and they're all $500K, you look at me and I say, hey, you just picked expensive builders. Yeah. You got to look at more. And that kind of resonates with them, that it's like, I'm just sitting here being honest. If you don't want to believe me, because and you do get some clients that say, well, I actually had a builder here last week and he said he could do this for like $250, $300K. Sign him up. I'm gonna leave right now if you don't want to continue talking, and I suggest you call him up, because if he can do that job for $300K and do it successfully, then you'd be a fool not to hire him. I don't think it's possible, and I've been doing this for damn near 30 years. So you could take whose ever advice. As you get older, and I'm sure you guys have experienced this too, but you get a little crankier, right? And Not so much crankier, but I just have less patience with people. So when they come at me and say, oh, well, I had a builder, go ahead, sign them up.
Right.
Yeah.
I've been doing this a while. If you think I'm that much of an idiot that I can't narrow this price down to within $50K, go ahead. I'm not the person for you. I got other people I can go work for.
With that being said, I mean, what? And I know you're kind of summarizing the process here, but why even come to the table with the option of we can put this out to bid?
Oh, that's exactly my point. When I tell them, I said, they say, well, I said, how do you plan on seeing this process go? And, so getting back to the very original question, I go out, I give every client or potential client the first meeting. So your first hour and a half, 2 hours with me is totally free. I'll sit there and we'll chat about it. But part of it is that it's like, how do you see this project going? Because I really want to understand your expectations. Do you plan on putting this out to bid? Are we going to have a bunch of builders put these numbers? Because let me tell you how that fails. You give this to 3 or 4 builders, and 2 or 3 of them are going to look at it and say, all right, 2,000 square feet or whatever times whatever my number is, here's X amount of dollars. Let me add 10% because I might forget something. They'll go through the drawings, do a few checks, and they'll throw it out there because they realize that they're doing 5 of them this week and they only need 1 or 2. Right? Mm-hmm. The builder that's really going to take the time to work with you and care as much about your project as you do is not the guy that's going to bid on it. It's the guy that wants to do the project and the one that you place faith in. All right?
For me, we operate that way. We want to get involved during the design process. We do pre-construction and kind of work alongside the design. But I'm also in the same boat as I'm sure a lot of people are. Is they feel as though they never had that opportunity. They haven't connected with an architect, or they're chasing a big architect that designs all the homes that they want. And and I'm speaking for myself. I sat with an architect, and it's a good meeting. They want to work with us, but they've been working with the same builder for 20 years, so working with us would be a risk. Maybe they'll send us something to bid on, and it's like, when you're in a position where the builder is trying to kind of break that conversation and have an opportunity to build these homes that they've always dreamed of, and then and their process is like ours, where it's we don't bid work, but the consensus is, well, in our firm, that's how that as John, you've said it before, it's like they're using that as how they bring value to the client. What. And you can only speak for yourself, I know, but I think that's something that so many people ask me. It's like, how do you get to work with these architects? How do you get to work with these interior designers? Are you bidding work? And my answer is no, but I'm in a little, I'm fibbing in a little bit of that, because there's oftentimes where we come across an architect that reaches out to us that we look at their portfolio and it's like, damn, that's what we want to build. And they want us to bid this job. You know what? We'll just do it this one time. And the reality is they're probably doing it because they needed another builder to bid on it, not because they were genuinely interested in us doing it. And we get excited and dump 40 hours into it and see you bye.
Yeah, and all you're doing is keeping their builder that they want to do the project honest.
Right.
Which is
it's so cool. Like dating. It's so like dating. Like, she finally asked me out. I'm going on the date.
Yeah.
And
sorry,
it's not
my ex-boyfriend
really
called.
Yep. And then you're gone. It's so true.
It's like I didn't realize Matt was going to call me back.
You know what's funny? Marianne Thompson, which, Nick, I think you should definitely connect with. They had a great meeting one time with me, and they said, I got to the table, and they were like, they kind of set the meeting up, so they want you to get face-to-face, and they're like, there's no question of expectations and execution at this level. So anybody that we bring you out of the 2 or 3 builders, it has nothing to do with the values going to be the same, the execution is the same, none of that's in question. It's really who you connect with. And I took away from that is like when I have a client that, let's say the architect's already attached to the project. Now it comes to the designer. I'll kick out a couple ideas that I have on my short list of designers, but it really comes down to you meeting with them and connecting with them. I can't force that. And I think that's where the value really happens. Not, hey, let me bring in 5 guys or girls or whatever it is, firms, and then you bid away. That's not there's a certain level that happens, but once you get past that and you have maybe experience or relationships or, that network, it becomes about who's the best fit. Like Steve, you said before, is the design really what your company wants to be doing? Is that client really who you want to be working for? And again, we've been on a really crazy ride over the last 10 years where you've had the opportunity to pick and choose. And I think over the next year, it might be, hey, maybe I should throw a bid out for this. Maybe I need to build that relationship now for the next 5-10 years.
Yeah, and I think, part of it, you guys as builders, part of it is there's always the fear of, okay, this architect's coming at me because you're probably going to give a cheaper price than this other guy that I work with. And I can just dump a bunch of this, I'm not going to figure all these things out. I'll just leave it to you to figure out. And so now I'm getting paid. You're figuring out how to do my job. And,
nightmare.
We're kind of whoring you out in a way. And, it's a dangerous game. It's a dangerous game. But you hit it, Johnny. I mean, when I talk to clients about how do you expect this to go, I said, think about this for a second. I mean, you're going to have this person in and out of your house for the next 10 months. They're responsible for $300,000 or $400,000 of your money. Do you really want to give that to the guy that gave you the lowest bid?
Seriously.
Or do you want to give it to the guy that, and I do, I give them, 2, 3, 4 builders and say, hey, all these guys are probably within 10% of each other. Have a meeting with them, and people are like, what do I say? Just have a conversation with them. Walk around the house, talk about what you're going to do. Ask them, how do they feel, schedule this and that. But just all you're trying to do is get a feel for who am I comfortable working with for the next 10 months on this project? And who do I think is still going to be, have a good relationship in 10 months?
I think you hit the nail there, and I'd even shorten it, just say, who are you comfortable with? Yeah. And that's something that we've, in conversations with people that we've worked with, that word's come up a lot, where it's, we were comfortable with you guys working in the house. When we moved back in and you guys were still working, there wasn't a sense of uncomfort. And that, you're absolutely right. People are short-sighted in the what I'll call the sales process, where it's all number driven, and they're not considering the relationship and the fact that this is a long-term time-wise. It's, it could be a year of us being in your house. Or forget the numbers at this point. Does the relationship work?
So true.
Right. And not only that, but does that relationship, does that have some kind of impact on budget, right? Because you do a project and say I'm working with you, Nick, and the guy says, hey, we have a budget of like $700K. But if we came at them with some spectacular, arrangement in their master bathroom and said, hey, this is probably like an extra 10 or 15 grand, but this is going to be like the coolest bathroom on record. Do you see that? Because to me, there's not much of a difference between 700 and 725. It's a 700-ish number, right?
Yeah.
But that's why I always ask if there's.
But you can't if you're. Yeah, if you come into that and you're not a comfortable person to be around, and they're asking you for $10,000 or $15,000 more right off the bat, it's like, there's not that sense of trust. You build trust in the beginning. That's exactly why I think it's important for us when we're involved in the sales process, because we are going to come to the table, and if the number is 700 that scares you, you're right. There's going to be an option there that might be 720. And we're just going to put it down on the paper so that, hey, for another 20 grand, you get exponentially more for your dollar. Your head just disappeared in your green screen. That was creepy.
Right. Well, that last dollar that you cut off is the first thing you didn't get, right?
Right. So I think that really it is but it's. And I think the four of us and everyone that's listening, because I think the majority of people listening are professionals, but I think the underlying question is, okay, yeah, that all makes sense. That's all great. How do we communicate that to a client in the very beginning?
And I think it starts when somebody goes to an architect or a builder, excuse me, like Steve had said, there's so many, I've ran into it. There's a lot of architects and a lot of designers who they get paid to design. They're charging hourly, and they're not taking into consideration how much a customer wants to spend and what that number that they fear is, and where they feel comfortable, and designing around that. And I think that there's so many men and women who are designing projects and creating this golden egg and getting paid for it, and then walking away and wiping their hands and leaving these customers with a design that they can never afford. And then it's backtracking and paying more, and you're working with a builder to value engineer it, and then you just spent all this money on an architect and a design that you're not even using in the first place. So I think so much of that does start with having that communication up front and finding somebody who not only understands the building but understands the financial and cost implications of building and changing and design, because it's tough to be able to reverse engineer a build to hit a budget. That takes a lot of time.
It costs money.
And you have to find somebody who knows what they're doing to say, hey, I'm going to design an addition that's $500,000, between $500,000 and $550,000. There's a lot of experience that it takes to be able to do that.
Yeah, and there's you have to be confident along the way. I have clients that sign on, and in the third design meeting, I'm packing up my bag, and I look at them and say, this was a really great meeting, but just understand, we didn't make one decision today that favored the budget. So prepare yourself, because clients have the shortest memory. They get to the end of the road and want to start building this, and it's 75, 80 grand more, 100 grand more, and they're like, how do we get here? Well, remember that masonry fireplace that we talked about that wasn't originally there, that you said would be a great idea? Right? Or the fact that your modest appliance budget is $38,000. That's not modesty there.
That's like the worst phone call to be on as a builder, a conference call, where we're designing a house and we're reviewing the design, and like you want to raise your hand on a phone call and be like, yo, those 3 fireplaces didn't exist in the last revision. That's like 24
now
to 28
you can raise
grand.
your hand on Zoom. You do the video call,
true.
and you press the it's like, oh, hello, it's my turn.
But I've done that, but Steve, you're absolutely right. Where we're doing a build right now in Carlisle, where right in the beginning, I was like, hey, your square footage for what you're targeting for a price, you're still high. We can't finish the basement. Then they went through the whole design process. They added 1,000 square feet to the main floor, and I was like, yo, this is one of the best lines I came up with was, for me over the years, is now you're diluting the quality of what you want to build with the size that you're trying to build it at. Whether that's building science, whether that's windows, whether that's insulation or finishes on the interior, you're diluting it, because if you tell somebody they're 50 grand over budget, they don't comprehend it. I think what we're all trying to talk about is, Tyler, you might get somebody that an architect has, that client might be on their first project or someone might be on their 10th project. And you need to figure out what it is that they need. A couple years ago, 5-6 years ago, I went to this meeting, unbelievable architect. We looked at it as an opportunity to do this build. We got the drawings, they were unbelievable. I was not head manning the design or the whole, Nick, I hate the whole pricing or sales kind of thing. It's more design and concept during that process, because sales means now we're focusing on money. It's the same as like a change order. It's an upgrade, meaning it's how you phrase it and get the mentality. I'm with you, but it's
I think from a professional, sorry to interrupt, I think from a professional side, it's the sales part of the process. When speaking with a client, it's the design side. The sales side is because it's number driven for us as builders. We're making sure that our numbers are accurate.
It's funny. I went into that building, that meeting. We went with the architect. We walked one of our projects. It seemed like a good fit. We were local. They had asked us. Then we went, and our next meeting was at the site with the client. I remember sitting at this meeting, and we were just trying to prove that we could do it. It was like, hey, we can build that. And I walked away going, like, what? I always kind of question what my contributing part was to that meeting. And I'm like, we never found out what it is they wanted. We said we could just build this, and we got the feedback on why we didn't get the job, and it's because we never questioned if you could build it or not. It was, what it is that we wanted to get out of that. So like what we talk about now all the time is, what is it you're trying to get out of? Is it this playlist of rooms that you want, like you're on your iPod? It's like you want to have these little tiny destinations. That's what we talk about. It's that relationship. It's finding out what it is behind the design and why the purpose is about it. And we never touched upon that. And it was an amazing job, but we looked at it as a job, not the design opportunity to create. And I think that's what I've learned over the years as experience, meaning a lot of people getting into this business right now is like, I want. But if you really want anything, you want to create. So you want to learn why.
Yeah, and I think, for me personally, I think you want to have some fun involved. Like I
totally.
I tell people I'm just playing big boys Legos, right? But the reality is I don't want the client that makes work seem like work. Right. And I mean that in a sense that people always ask, well, what's your favorite project to work on? And my answer is always the same. The one with a good client. The client that'll listen, the client that'll respond appropriately, be honest, and, be confident.
And grateful.
Yeah,
and
be grateful. Exactly. Yep. I mean, it's amazing to me that when I look back on 30 years and say, okay, and I could pick out the top 3-4 clients and projects.
Totally.
They paid full price and never complained once. And actually they said,
but they probably got more because of the way they treated you.
And I just I'm working on a project right now, and I tease her. I said, you're almost at all-time favorite client status. and she just laughs.
Well played.
And but she's the first one to say, she goes, I don't think you're charging me for everything. And I'm like, I'm doing fine. Don't worry about it. We're this is a really happy project, and they are just super clients. And every time we meet, it's, Steve, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate what you're doing here. We're loving the way the project comes out, and it's absolutely amazing. And it's again, it gets tied to that we as professionals, but I won't say there's professional clients out there, but there's professionals that are clients, right? And I'll give you an example. I did a project, probably, 8-9 years ago, a project in Wayland, and the client was as professionally successful as probably almost any person can get. He was the CEO of a worldwide financial company, and I wasn't doing his house. He had some multi-gazillion dollar residence, but he had bought a number of properties to merge them and build his property. And then as a result, he ended up with a couple properties. He sold one of them off, but he had this one and he wanted to renovate it. It was like a 2,000 square foot Cape, and we put an addition on. So anyways, started working with him. Well, the first couple, say, weeks, maybe month or so, month and a half, there was a lot of I don't know how to explain it, like almost like, okay, is he testing me? What are we doing here? And and it's like, hey, this guy is who he is, and it's like, okay, this is pretty high profile, and just chatting with him. But then he said a couple things, and I pushed back and said, I think you're wrong with that. Let me explain. And I explained a couple things, and he took it to heart, not in a bad way. He took it to heart like, hey, this guy's going to be totally honest with me. But the thing that I came to realize is the reason he's successful is because he searches out people that know their job, and then he gives them the responsibility to do their job. And it was like almost immediately from that time that I challenged him, when somebody else came up and said, hey, what are we doing over here or this? He goes, well, I think we should do this, but let's get Steve's opinion. Right? And he immediately, so you sit back as, even then I was 10 years younger, but I sit back and I think about it and say, okay, maybe we need to shut up more often than not and just really pay attention to what's going on and surround, like you said, Nick, surround ourselves with people that make us feel uncomfortable and challenged. I mean, again, CEO of a worldwide financial firm. There probably wasn't many days in his life in the last 15 years where somebody said no to him and didn't do anything but run and get a spreadsheet and deliver it, hand deliver it to them. And so
I never thought of that from a client side as being, working, I always think about other peers, but from a client side, those that make you feel uncomfortable. And I'm sitting here thinking about who I would put in my top 3, and I would say the top 3 of them all made me super uncomfortable. Through the whole same thing. It was the initial meetings where they would ask questions, and it was the same. I remember one very specific. It was early on. They sent me the drawings. I had them for a week. I gave them a budget number, an estimated number, and it was immediately challenging questions saying, well, what would you do for this? And what would you do for that? And they were all specs that were called out on the drawings, and I had reviewed the drawings. So I'm like, oh yeah, well that's specified, and this is how we would achieve this, and this is how we would do that. And he's like, all right, we can move on to the next meeting. And I'm like, that. So that was a straight up test, and it was uncomfortable, but I think that is important to note. It's it's similar. They're world class at what they do, and they want to be in a position where they can feel as though they trust you because you're making the right decision, whether it's agreeing with them or not.
I think like you just said, it's trust, and that's a huge thing for me. And I think that some of my best customers or clients are those who I knew trusted me, or once you got past that point, trusted you to do your job, that if there were something, or there were an upgrade, or there were a decision to be made, they trusted and valued your opinion. And you still have to talk it out and go through the steps and make sure everyone was on board. But it wasn't like they questioned every single thing that you did, or they didn't trust what you were doing. They hired you because you're a professional, and that's what you do on a daily basis, and they just let you do that.
Mm-hmm. I also feel like, Steve, when you were talking, and even Nick, that at certain clients will bait you a little bit, where they'll say something along the lines of, what do you think of this? Like almost phrasing it like you should just agree. And like recently we had a client that's in California, and we're like, I'm like, am I missing something? Like it makes you question what I'm supposed to say, and then what is it they want to say. And it makes you really realize you just need to stick to your guns and you go, no, that isn't what, Steve, you said it perfectly. We have to be great listeners at our job. Like we're doing the farmhouse build right now, and they hired a landscape architect to do the outside of it. And I'm standing around at the job on Friday with a beer with the client, and I'm like, I feel happy and proud of myself that 2 years into the project, we're still able to have a beer on a Friday at the job site. And then B was like, hey, in the beginning of this design, we didn't do a walkout basement because you wanted to walk from patio to patio. Why is there a 30-foot knee wall going up around blocking that off? Like, did I miss something in the dialogue? And this is from 2 years ago.
Right.
And I feel like it's part of my job is to be able to recall those things, because the general contractor has to have the general knowledge of what's happening on the site, whether it's a Friday night or, being over the shoulder during the landscape architect. And he sent out an email Saturday going, hey, I went back to the job site, and this 30-inch knee wall, when I sit in my couch, it blocks my view over the forest. And that was the whole reason why I bought this property.
Yeah. And you know what? You just struck a chord with me, Johnny. It's like, I'll give my secret to all the young architects out there. When a client asks me, why should I hire you? My answer is not because I can deliver the answers. I tell them because I know what questions to ask. Right? So it's not that I have all the answers. It's just I know what questions to ask. When we're, like you're talking about that patio versus a walkout, I know that we should be asking these questions, or you say you want this, but let's rule out the obvious. Let's take it to, the 101 level and make sure that we're blatantly understanding and, we can rule that out. I tell everybody the first 2 meetings, a no is definitely probably more valuable than a yes, because we need to get beyond the things that you think are valuable in this design to move on to the things that are truly valuable in this design. And, when you're starting out a project, every client, I know exactly what I want. No, you don't. No, you don't. You know exactly what you lived in, and you know exactly what your sister just built. That's what you know.
And that's a red flag right away. When they're like, I make decisions quickly and I know what I want. It's like, okay, those are both things that we have to work on.
And it's funny because when I start a project, I always ask all my clients to write like a 2 or 3 page narrative. And it does a couple things. One, it provides...
You give them homework?
Yeah, I have a whole email homework that I just cut and paste. You hire me, you get the email homework. There's actually probably about 6 bullet points. But the big one is the narrative. And there's a couple reasons. One, I want the people to start thinking about the project beyond what they were thinking about. Because you sit down with the one client, and I have one now, and she's like, "Oh, I want a 22 by 22 family room." It's like, okay, that's pretty interesting. Why 22? Well, my sister's got 20 by 20, and I think we need it to be a little bit bigger because I can get a bigger couch. It's like, yeah, okay. How about if we do this? How about if you write a narrative and you tell me what you think a successful family room is? And don't have anything to do with dimensions. Just what do you think is successful? Do you want to throw tons of Super Bowl parties and have 30 people in that room sitting down? Or is it a room that you and the kids can play Monopoly on a Friday night and feel very comfortable in? Or you and your husband can sit down and watch a movie on Friday night and the scale is so comfortable that you just kind of ease into his shoulder and enjoy the movie, right? What's important for you? And that's true of anything with kitchens. I've had clients that, hey, we're damn near gourmet cooks, and I've had clients that, the closest thing we come to doing in the kitchen is microwaving. That's dinner for us.
Well, you're exactly right. You have to paint into John, the patio reference. Like, people are valuing things because whether it's their sister built something or the market says a walkout basement is more valuable. Like, all of these things where let's skip all that and let me paint the vision for you, just like you did about the couch. It's like, if I can paint you this vision, it's like, hey, you're sitting in your, the farmhouse, you're sitting in that back glass room and your kids are running through the backyard and they're looping around the yard like, maniacs, and they don't have a wall to trip over or climb over or fall off of. Doesn't that sound better? When you start painting that vision, that's when it becomes more personal and the decisions are made on a personal level, which they should always be made on. Building a home, right?
Yeah.
And oftentimes they're not because they're skewed by what they think is valuable.
And you have to remind clients of that. It's like you're building a custom house. Guess what? You don't need to make it look like Jim and Sally's house. You get to have whatever you want. This is custom. That's why it's a custom house. That's why you're doing this. If you didn't want to do this, then go down the street. There's a guy down there selling 5 houses on a cul-de-sac. Buy one of them. Knock yourself out. So
yeah, I mean, John, I think it was you that told the story about how when people walked into one of your houses, right? And they went, and then you want them to go back home and be like, why didn't we buy that? Or how did the value? Like, that's why you put a different stamp on what you build. And I think
it's so true. I mean, there's got to be a takeaway. I feel like we're having 2 different conversations. I love the takeaway, but my mind's racing on, people design stuff without listening, to Steve's point. And we made decisions on the farmhouse where we put a shelf in that foundation to accept all the floor joists. That was a $15,000 upgrade 2 years ago. One of the first decisions made when I had that project. And now the landscape architect, a year and a half later, who's just doing what they want to do, has you walking out 2 steps onto a patio. Why did we spend $15,000?
Right.
Whatever it was. It's like, and then I go back to the client and go, hey, real quick, maybe I missed something. And is something okay with you being wrong?
Sure.
And clarifying something and going, hey, did I miss something? Why is there a step? Because when you have a few drinks and you go out the slider, you're not going to want a step. You're going to want to walk right onto patio, and not have to go down it's 3 rises really. And he's like, no, we never want to do that. I'm like, all right, because everything's designed right now around having 2 steps out of, in the farmhouse build, you can basically go out of almost every door on the first floor and it should be at grade. And I'm like, did we change that?
Should.
What?
Should be.
It's 7 inches.
Better be.
But it's like, why do we do that? And he's like, no, we absolutely should. And I'm like, all right, I just wanted to make sure. But like, who is there? You have to be that representation for the client when they have a job, they have a family, they have all these things, especially when the world's falling apart around us, that you're focused on them. And you're digging into those details and you're raising your hand where, like, I think the bottom line is you have to have trust, but you also have this confrontation that Steve's talking about where, yeah, I respect you. But when it comes down to the bottom line, I need to be able to voice my opinion and go, hey, I had a meeting with Carl, the landscape architect. I'm like, hey, we talked about this grading before, and I trusted you because you said you went over it with the client. I then put in an 80-foot retaining wall that you'll never fucking see. Why? And he's like, well, it's the grade. And I'm like, I never see it. Why did I have to put an 8-foot wall in when I could have put down stone 4 feet down and done this? You're basically eating up the client's budget, and the client may not say that to you. I'm going to be that guy. Right. So there's your punch in the face, Steve. Yeah. Where it's like, yeah, I respect you, but do you really respect the client? You're just going to keep designing and designing and designing.
John, you brought this up, I think, a couple of episodes ago, and Steve, I would bring this to you is, all right, myself, John, Tyler, you, Steve, we are all able and capable to be that advocate and kind of come to the table and say no when stuff like that happens. How are you going to teach that mentality to your kids?
Great question.
So one of the first things when John was talking, it hit me. It's like, we as people in general, we sit there and we don't ask questions because we don't want to be the idiot, right? Oh, that's a dumb question. Why are you asking that? Or I tell my clients quite often, I'm going to be blatantly obvious here, and I just feel a need to answer this question so we can move on, but I want to make sure we're on the same page. And I'll ask that because I think the idiot is the one that fails to ask the question and then gets caught with his pants down 3 months or 3 weeks later, right? That's the true idiot. It's like, man, all you had to do was ask me a couple weeks ago. I would have told you what the hell the answer was. And now you're having a very uncomfortable conversation because it went south, and it went south because you didn't answer a simple question that you were afraid to ask but knew you should have asked. So,
and I've been at those meetings where Steve, I totally with you, where it's like, maybe I don't have enough experience, maybe I am the youngest guy here. Does it matter? Like, I've been at a meeting where the huge build we did years ago with the underground sport court, and I'm like, you have Bob Marzilli, Lombardi, all these heavy hitters, and no one's asking the obvious question. And I'm like, screw it. Like, and I put my hand up and I'm like, what are we doing about this? And they're like, oh, and I gave it, what do I want to say? I gave it like 2 rounds of a conversation to be like, someone's going to bring this up. And then no one did. And I'm like, well, I guess it's on me then. And I think that's where you build value with that client about that. Hey, and that client actually texted me this past weekend and was like, hey, you were the reason why this project came to happen because there wasn't any limitations and you always spoke up for what it is that we wanted. And that's, if I can walk away from what I do, not just the portfolio, that phrase, that comment is what I want to be held accountable for.
My experience with builders, the ones that are extremely successful are the yay sayers, for lack of a better term, meaning they don't yes you to death, but there's kind of a couple scenarios when you're sitting down with the client's builder and stuff, and the client says, oh, can we drop the floor in the basement 2 feet so I can make it a gym so I can jump rope down there? There's the one builder that kind of rolls his eyes and go, yeah, I mean, I guess we can. It's not going to be cheap. It's going to be expensive, but yeah, I guess we can do it, whatever. And then there's the builder that sits there and goes, yeah, that's not a problem. Let me just figure out a number. I'll get you a number this afternoon. And, if you green light it, then we'll go from there and we'll make it happen. And it's like, that's like the best businessman, right? It's like, yeah, you want me to do it? That's fine. Yeah. I'm going to charge you for it. You're going to get hit on it. And
sure,
I'll give you a fair price, but you're going to pay for it. And I don't understand people that don't want to do their job, right? I walk on a job and the plumber says, hey, there ain't no way we're putting a toilet over there. I don't know what the hell you were thinking. It's like, okay, all right, hold on. I got to call the client and tell them that they can't have a toilet in their master bath. No. We're not going there. Our job is to figure it out. I said, how about if we do this, this, and that? How about if we just move that beam over? We cut through there. We'll get a repair plan from the structural engineer. We'll solve that, or whatever. And he's like, yeah, okay. I guess we could probably make that work. It's like, really?
You know what it is? There's guys that sell fear, and that's how they think they bring value to the situation. And I get it. I've been around it, and I've seen even John, my assistant PM. He fell into that. Like, the client wanted to change the spout to the tub on one of our products, the Ivy Custom. They just didn't like it once it was in. I'm like, all right, we'll take a look at it. We'll order the new one. We'll see what the rough-in is. And John, my guy, meets with the plumber. And I get a phone call from the client going, hey, this isn't going to be, a quick couple hours worth of work. It's going to be a couple days. We won't be able to get this done while we're away. And I'm like, hold up. Let me just check in to see if there's something I missed. I call the plumber. He goes, you have to open the ceiling. I'm like, of the garage, which is an easy patch. We're not in the living space. I can refoam that, and I have plenty of access for blocking so that thing doesn't rock. And explain to me what I'm missing. Just not as an arrogant person, but just what do I need to be able to tell the client so expectations are met? And he's like, no, you're right. That's it. But my guy, John, never had that conversation with my plumber. He just took it verbatim and was like, all right. And the client overheard that, and now it's not what we all said it was going to happen. And sure enough, they went away. They came back. Everything was done easy peasy. No patch needed. But people sell fear because why? They can go to an easier job right now. No one's selling fear right now because there's enough fear out there with Corona.
Yeah.
Everyone just, I'll do whatever you need me to do.
And I'm sure all three of you have experienced the client that tries to push fear, right? So you're sitting around the table. They're doing this massive remodeling, and then they look at you and say, hey, Nick, I've been thinking about it. And we're doing this. Can we replace these 3 windows in the dining room? And they say it in such a manner where they're just expecting you to just roll it into the project miraculously somehow, right? Like, oh yeah, I'll jump right on that. We'll throw that in, not a problem. And years ago, I was actually much younger. It was probably like a dozen years ago, working with a builder. We're down in Newton, and that came up. That exact story. Hey, we want to replace these 3 windows, and it was one of these brick Tudors down there, and so the builder's like, yeah, okay, it's probably, I don't know, $2,500 a window. And the homeowner looked immediately astonished, like, you're going to give me a price to do this? And he looked astonished and just said, wow, $2,500 a window. And he said, yeah, $2,500 a window. The window's, probably $600. I got to take the old one out. I got to reflash that opening. I got to put the new one in. I got to get my painter here. We got to trim it out. We got to do all this work. He said, yeah, and then I have to make money. I'm in the business to make money. Not make a killing, but I do have to turn a profit on this. I can't be putting windows in for you and paying to do it. And then the homeowner says, well, is there any way we can knock down that price? And his answer was absolutely classic. He looked at the homeowner and said, well, I can put a call into the lumberyard tomorrow, and if they're willing to pass on any savings to the window, I can pass that savings on directly to you. And I was just thinking to myself, I was like, man, that is just one ballsy answer, but it's so true. It's like, get off my back on trying to get stuff for free. It's like, it costs money. And,
I thought you were going to say, yeah, well, I guess I could only replace 2 of them instead of all 3.
Yeah, but, I tell clients, I say good things cost money. That's one of my favorite lines in any conversation with clients. They come out with all these house pictures and send me this, and it's like, hey, well, first of all, you get those that just don't totally understand, right? It's like, oh, I want to redo my kitchen, and they're in a Cape with a 7'4" ceiling. And they're showing me pictures of, Dallas kitchens that have 10 feet of cabinetry up the wall and transoms. And it's like, is there any way we can do this? And I was like, yeah, if you crawl around the kitchen on your knees and we put the countertop at 2 feet maybe. But that's about the only way you're going to experience that relationship. And but no. And then you get the ones that show you that picture from house, and it's like, yeah, that's nice, but that's a $250K, $300K kitchen. And they're like, oh, yeah. I'm like, yeah, your $80,000 budget isn't, like, you couldn't even buy those cabinets and appliances on your budget. And they're like, oh, okay. It's like, yeah, good things cost money. And when people see the prices, and I get that same thing. I do some remodeling work here. I have, one of the builders that I do a bunch of work with, he'll send a couple guys over, we replaced a couple trim. The guy pulls up in the front of my house. He's got his truck, and it literally looked like a handful of Versatex sticks on the ladder rack. And then he hands me a bill, and it's like $725. And I was like, holy crap. I'm like, what else you got in the truck? And he's like, no, that's it. It's right there. That stuff's not cheap. And it's like, yeah, okay. Now I understand why that trim package on that house is 15 or 20K to just get it delivered in the yard, But yeah, I love my job for those reasons too, right? Because I have never ever ceased to be amazed. I've had like people cry at the initial meeting in front of me, like, hey, we want to redo our kitchen and this and that, and it's like, okay, do you have a number that scares you? It's like, what do you mean? Well, do you have a number that you're afraid of? Well, we were thinking we were going to do this for like 50 grand, but we can probably go to 60 if we had to. It's like, okay, let's run a really quick exercise here. You got about 18 feet of cabinet. We're going to add a couple more. Figure about 500 feet or $500 for a modest cabinet, right? So you're at like 12, 15K in cabinetry, maybe about 8K, very modest appliance budget, 5 or 6K in some stone countertops. We're at your 40K budget, and all we did was go shopping and have somebody drop stuff off in the driveway. Nobody's done any work. It was a shopping exercise, and we're already at your budget. There's no way we can do this for that price. Not here. Maybe down in Texas, we can get Jordan, bang that out, site paint it or something, and get it. But yeah, you get all those calls too, and it's just always amazing. And then the woman like starts crying. It's like, I'll never get that new kitchen. And it's like, yeah, probably not. Sorry to be your dream wrecker, but yeah, you ain't getting it. Not on that budget.
It's tough. We had a meeting today with a potential client, and we had a really great first meeting. Their budget was low. We explained what we could do and what it was going to cost. They were okay with it. And, for us, they wanted to get the ball rolling. And then there was a lag in communication. Then it came back to the original budget and figuring out can we do everything for our original budget? And it's, in a way, it's like, I feel like I'm repeating myself. It's like, no, to do everything that you want is this much money. If you want to do, I need to know what's important. Do you need to get the scope of work done, or do you need to stick to the financial restraint? If we're sticking to the financial restraint, then we are reducing scope. If we need to get the scope done, then we are increasing budget.
But I also think there's a bit of empathy that needs to be involved in that conversation.
That's what I was just going to get at. That's one of the hardest things. No, it's fine. It's when someone comes to you and doesn't have the budget. Like when we get an inquiry online, it's like, hey, kitchen renovation, blah, 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 fills out all this great information, inspiration photos, budget 35 grand. And I'm like, I need to write.
I can't turn the shop lights on. The power in the shop on for that.
Well, to John's point, it's like, I need to write this email with empathy because I still want them to receive that email in a good mood, where it's like,
in a respectful manner.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Right.
Respectful.
Not be like, oh yeah, your budget doesn't fit what we do. We do too nice of work for you.
Well, I guess I was thinking of that. The kind of timeline you just talked about was like the world has changed in a month. Like you could have that initial meeting, and then people could have lost 50% of their net worth on stocks. So yeah, the bubble of hey, we have an opportunity of contingency of 20%. That 20% and some went out the window. So that's what I meant by empathy, is that like we've had clients now where it's like, hey, do we want to put it on hold, or do we just not really want to go so extravagant, where the luxury part is getting removed from, I think, some of the design that we do.
But I think part of it too is it's that managing expectations. So bullet point number 2 on my email homework to clients is identify needs, wants, and desires. And people say, well, what's the difference? Well, needs are things that you wouldn't do the project unless you got them. Those are the core elements of the project. The wants are things that, yeah, it'd be really nice to get this, but I only need to get maybe half of these wants to be satisfied. And then desires are kind of those luxury items where if it fits in, we can get 2 or 3 out of the list of 8 and fit those in. But understand that you're not getting all these desires and you're not getting all of these wants. You can get all of the needs, but part of your job, so that I can do my job effectively, is that you need to communicate your expectations of value and what's the most important to you, right? So,
Steve, you did a really good job dodging my question, though. How are you going to teach this to your kids?
ooh,
Because John brought it up before. I've talked about it. And John has asked me. It's, I can be in a room with a client and navigate the right thing to do. Where, like, if John wasn't on site in the land, is that a donut?
It's pizza.
Oh.
Homemade pizza.
Now I'm hungry. No, but if John wasn't on site and the landscape architect came and put that 30-inch knee wall around the backyard blocking the view, never asked the question, and maybe one of his, maybe his APM was there and it went through, ultimately it probably wouldn't have been an issue until further down the line, and it would have just kind of been brushed under the rug as a client decision. But the point is he hired John because of his reputation and his vision and what he does, and this is where the growth in a company, how do you pass on this style of knowledge or navigating?
I think the professionalism is a two-way street. I think as a teacher, I have the responsibility to provide them the right information and in the right manner. So that being said, I probably won't have a problem of saying, hey, once a week, I'm going to send you out. Maybe it's the morning. Hey, they're putting windows on at the Joneses. Go put them in with them. Throw on your jeans, throw on your work boots, and I'm going to, I'll call over there to Bobby and tell him that you're coming over and I want you to help install those windows. And I don't think, and if I have the time, certainly I would join her or him and do that. But I think they need to hold me accountable as the teacher to properly teach them. I can't expect her to ever draw a window detail not having ever installed a window. I think that is not fair to her. I don't think that's managing my expectations of trying to make her a professional and trying to get her to expect it. And I think she needs to hold me accountable to say, hey, bozo, you can't expect me to draw a window detail if you never took me out there to show me how to install a window. And likewise, I think as the teacher, it's our responsibility to hold the students accountable. It's like, okay, I took you out there, we installed like 3 or 4 windows. I'm not necessarily expecting you to come back and be the one that draws every window detail, but I don't expect you to fail at whatever component that we reviewed a number of times. And I actually have a hardcore example of that. My nephew is also an architect down in Louisiana. And he used to do a bunch of existing drawings and stuff for me and some work. So I would send him existing drawings. I'd say, listen, draw a first floor plan, and the things that go through the building, the fireplace, the stairs, the chimney, when they go through the building, just copy them over and make sure they're in the same spot on the second floor plan. So he did the very first set. He took them. I immediately took those set of drawings and took the second floor, dropped it on top of the first floor. And the stairs, the fireplace, these things were off 4 or 5 inches. And I was like, how did that happen? He goes, well, I went by your dimensions. I said, what did I tell you? I said, do this and copy it over. Second set of drawings. He does it. I take it immediately. I take it, drop it on top of there. Stairs are over 4 inches. And I'm like, you can't do this. He goes, well, that's what your number said. I said, what did I tell you? I explicitly explained it to you, and I have to hold you accountable for it because you held me accountable for it to teach you. Obviously, the stairs don't step over 4 inches as we go to the second floor, right? They have to be in the same place. And it doesn't really matter, and I explained it to him. I said, it doesn't really matter if the number is wrong, right? What matters is that if the number is wrong, the builder's a smart guy. He's going to understand where that 4-inch discrepancy is. But if we have the stair in two different places, he doesn't know which one is right. So if we put it in the same place and he understands the discrepancy, then we can solve the problem, because we don't have it's this or that. We just have this, but it needs to be that. So, and my students, I mean, it's not my students, my kids, it's tough love. I mean, thank God for my wife. She would consistently remind me that I'm not in the Marine Corps anymore, and she would take care of it. But my kids would swim and they would come up crying because they came in second or something, and I was like, well, work harder at practice. What do you want me to tell you? Get away from me. Don't cry here. It's like, you want to be a better swimmer, go work harder in practice. You're not going to get a better swimmer. Nobody's going to give it to you. You got to get out there and take it. And the same thing. And part of it is, and I'm being brutally honest here, is, my daughter, she's a woman. And whether we choose to believe it or not, I think you need to be even more on top of your game as a woman to gain that respect from the people out at the job site. Right?
Sure.
And I'm not trying to be gender biased or feminist.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's yeah, you're right.
It's the way it is, and
it's young, reality,
right?
Yeah.
I mean, the cards are stacked against you. You're young, you're a woman, you don't know anything. Right. These guys are going to try and walk all over you. So you need to pay attention and go out there. And part of it too is I'll be there standing right behind her, just like that day when I did my first lecture and Joe was sitting in the back of the room, and I'll look right at the concrete guy like, yeah, go ahead. Ask her that dumb question that you don't think she's going to understand, because if she don't, I'll jump right in and I will answer it.
What going
Nick,
into
Nick, hold on. I think for my aspect of how to teach my guy that is that, like, I'll have that meeting at 5:00 on a Thursday night where the client just shows up and we kind of have that dialogue. It's really up to that person to stay and kind of eavesdrop on that dialogue. If he decides to go home, it's very similar to where we had our talk at Cape Cod Lumber, and we talked about not having a sick day policy or any of that stuff. And Steve's like, raised his hand and was like, well, but what happens if they just take a bunch of time off? And it was a valid question. In my head, I was like, Steve doesn't have any employees. What's that question for? And B, I was just like, no, he's right. But Nick, you and I talked about it afterwards. We don't institute systems for them to fail and anticipate that. But if they do get abused, right out of the gate, they're not the right person. You don't have to feel it out. So it's
you're not firing them because they took all these days off. You're firing them because they're not the right cultural fit.
Yeah.
It just happened to relate to the fact that they weren't there.
Yeah. So John stayed for that meeting that was impromptu. We were just there finishing the day and debriefing, and he just eavesdropped. And like, he apologized at the end. He's like, I'm sorry for just hanging around. I'm like, no, that's exactly what we should be looking for, because now he knows the value of paying attention 2 years ago and writing things down in your notebook and standing up for that client when no one else is going to, when you're just the builder at that point. I'm not getting paid as a landscape architect.
I'll double down on that. It's, especially in a lot of these pre-planning meetings, I'm taking more time in essentially assigning a project manager who would be in charge of that job even before we sell. And it's like, hey, Mike, Nick, you, Ken, whoever it is, like, you come with me. This is an early meeting. I want you to understand how we go through this process and involve them more and more, and even through those meetings. And it, going back to, the question I got was, do I miss being, not in this podcast, but do I miss being a carpenter? And I had said at one point I'd missed it a lot, and now I'm starting to feel a lot of, it's really, I really like seeing the team build and become better as individuals and as a team. It's the same thing now as these project managers. It's where I show up, or we have that meeting, and then I step out and I'm not at the next one, and I see them come out of it with a new and improved or something better. And it's like, I know that that's because we met on that job 2 weeks ago, and I walked them through the process that I would have taken, and they now have the confidence to do it. And
but
that,
it's funny that Good.
No.
There's a whole nother aspect to that where, like right now, John does a lot of production for me day to day. Okay, but I still hold the client meetings, and so, if that job site looks like trash, even though he's responsible for the job site, meaning is the dumpster swapped out, is the porta-john clean, is the site swept, is there cobra vent on top of the vents during rough framing, if he doesn't do that, I have to explain it at the meeting. Right. Until he's responsible for that meeting, he never sees that value. It's just a chore. It's just a checklist to him that I go, hey, this needs to get done. That's John being crazy. Actually, I can see Tyler having a lot of that checklist. Same thing. But like until he has that meeting, he doesn't understand that Friday comes around, you look like trash. You might be the most well-dressed.
He hasn't had any of the repercussions of what happens when it does, when it doesn't happen.
Yeah. When you have to then not go about your meeting and your topics and your agenda, and you have to spend the first 30 minutes going, why does it look like trash? Like I sit there on a Thursday and we lump a Sub-Zero into place because the hood got finished and the wiring's done, and I put the hood away. I put the whole stove in, and John's like, why are we doing that? I'm like, because now the kitchen looks done. It looks 100% done where the stove's not out of place, where the client obviously sees that every week, and you have to look for those obvious things. I know you're trying to get a lot of stuff done, but when you walk in the job site and that vent is uncovered and collecting debris, that's what the client sees every time. So then when they walk in and you could get so many things done. You could finish tiling the entire master bathroom. They might walk in and go, you know what else I see is? All I see is that vent empty, full of crap every week. And it's like, that's what you got to look for. And it's trying to teach those little idiosyncrasies that happen on a job site and not get overwhelmed or this, I want to say immature success because you feel like you got all this done. But it's never about that.
I think all of that can get lumped into one thing, because while you're talking, what I was thinking was, for me it's a little different because it's my daughter, not necessarily an employee. So, it's family employee. It's not like I can fire her and have a good Thanksgiving, right? So it's I have to figure that out. But beyond that, it's getting her to understand that when she works hard, does things right, and makes it look good, it's to her benefit, because this company will eventually be hers. Where I think one of the hardest things for employee relationship is getting the employees to understand that, when you do things like pay attention to the details of the porta-john and this and that, and we get that next big job, that it helps me because now I get to build a cooler house with a bigger budget and better clients, and I get to have a happier job because I took the time to worry about the porta-john and things like that. So instilling that sense into her too, I think, is going to be extremely important to understand that, to be successful, we have to work hard. We have to pay attention. We just can't be, hey, la la land, dad'll figure it out, because there's literally going to be a day, I know, that dad isn't going to be here, and you're in the swimming pool by yourself, and now you got to figure it out. And, so how do you get there? And it's my job to try and get you there as fast as I can, but you really have to pay attention and be on your game to get us there.
And I think in parallel with that, you need to accept mistakes, and you need to have a culture that accepts mistakes in effort to learn from them.
Yeah,
that is hugely important, and that's another question we get. I get is that how, like, what happens when you guys make a mistake? It's like we learn from it. Yeah. We take 5 minutes and like, hey, what happened? Why did it happen? How do we prevent it? All right, cool. We learn from it. Yeah. And but it needs to be supported.
But I think at the same time, we always have this conversation, Nick and I always pipe up at the exact same moment, is that it's not like never ending. You get me? You can have that understanding, and you can say, yeah, I accept this and I get it, but you are running a business. Like, for instance, we're doing Suffolk Custom, and we ordered a bunch of 5-quarter for the exterior, and I asked for it to get returned. I asked for it to get returned a number of times. Now we're landscaping the back of the house. I walk in there Friday, all that material was then put on a Bobcat, shuffled over to the other side of the driveway, and just tossed. So, okay, I can accept that, but there's got to be an understanding of disappointment in that this is costing the company
Correct.
$3,000. We can't reuse that.
That's not. Yeah, that's. I mean, there's the one time you learn from it.
Yeah, exactly. That's what my point is. That this, I guess that's the only point I want to make with that comment is that yeah, we can all be understanding in that it is a family. Steve, I know it's your daughter, but I have a huge amount of time invested in my guy John. That like I want it to be a family. We do things together. We're into it together, and I do take responsibility that, you know what, I never followed up and made a call with Ian to say, hey, pick that crap up. So I am partially responsible as well for that mistake in that 3,000. But knowing that, hey, next time one of us is, I have to go back to the rule where in the beginning when we hire somebody is that, hey, this is the task. At the end of the day, I'm still going to follow up on that task regardless if I gave it to John. Because John needs to realize that there's a sense of urgency that if he doesn't do it by the end of the day or the following day, like I joked about it a couple weeks ago, it was like we swapped out the porta johns. It's like, or the construction fence. I was like, hey, can you make sure I don't have to renew that construction fence and have it pulled because we're done with the project? I got the renewal in the mail. I called them anyways. It hadn't been done. Did I have that conversation with John? No. He's hearing it now. But he showed up on Monday and the fence was pulled. That wasn't magic.
Do you think he realized it?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the point, is that I don't need to drill stuff home, but when he shows up and things
you're
moved,
drilling it indirectly. It's
exactly.
like, oh shit, like John had to call for
this
that
has
fence.
to get done regardless of you. And if you're not pulling your weight, then I'm going to have to, which is a detriment to the growth of the company.
You know, I'm sure that everyone has a different teaching methods, and Steve, obviously it's going to be different with your daughter, but I think it is good, like you said, to get her on site and see some of those details and get hands on in whatever's going on. Because I think that there, especially with a lot of architects at this point, there is a disconnect between what's going on paper and what's happening in the field, and everything's changing so quickly. And I think that a lot of people won't give her that respect until they truly understand that she understands what she's drawing and the implications of what she's drawing. And I think that there's a lot of people who aren't actually getting that field experience or seeing how people work to put a window in, or how they flash a detail, or the process and the amount of people involved. And I think that that's just going to benefit her immensely.
I mean, bring that full circle, Steve, back to your comment about the larger firms. Oftentimes details get drawn, from final product and then work backwards, only to a point where you understand the intent. And then for us, we get the drawing. It's like, okay, I get that that's what you want it to look like when it's done, but has anyone considered what it would take to do that? Right. And the fact that, I'm not saying that the detail is impossible. What I'm saying is that what is drawn isn't the right approach.
Right. Yeah, and we're all on that learning curve. Hell, I did a post the other day. I'm doing this project where we had all the interior doors built. And I posted it thinking, hey, I'm cool. Hey, look at me. We got all the interior doors, right? and then someone posts a question
hey,
of,
I'm cool.
Well, what's the core? Is it this or did you do this? And I was like, holy crap, I don't know. I actually had to text the wood shop and say, hey, those cores, help me out here. What did we do there so I can respond appropriately? But, it's like, even doing this 30 years, I paint myself into the corner and sit there and go, holy crap. How the hell do I get out of the room now? I got to figure this out.
But I don't know about you, but that's what I love about, even if there's slight negativity behind that comment, right? It makes it's educating you.
Yeah.
Because you don't know the answer. It's like, I never thought that I needed to know what the core of that door was. Now I'm going to ask. So next time you draw that door and you order it from the mill shop, you're probably going to put it on the bottom like, hey, use XYZ core.
Yeah. So
because it's part of that knowledge base.
Since I'm being brutally honest, right? The same thing. Post this thing, and it's like someone, you guys are all familiar, right? There's biscuits, there's dowels. I know that. And then someone posts, it's like, hey, great work using the dominoes. And I was like, Dominoes? What the hell is he talking about? I don't know what the hell dominoes are. That's that little game with the stuff on the table. What the hell is he talking about? I posted this millwork, project that we're doing for this. And it's like, so then I was at the wood shop and I was like, hey, help me out here, buddy. Dominoes. What are we talking about? He goes, oh, that's these. They're just basically elongated dowels. They're kind of an extruded biscuit, however you want to look at it, but they're just bigger and stronger. It's like, holy crap. I didn't know that until about 5 minutes ago. And
Right.
But we're always learning. And one of my favorite comments is we're all on a learning curve. We're just in different seats.
And even just being able to ask that question, I think, is huge.
Yeah.
A lot of people just kind of let that ride and even try and go figure it off on their own, where it's like, just ask somebody. I think that's something
have a little humility
for me over the years, where I remember starting out and being so afraid to ask questions, even going to a vendor or a wholesaler and not knowing, or an inspector, and basically having a conversation with them that you didn't want to allude to not knowing. And at this point now, it's just like, just ask the question. Yeah. Like, it's completely fine that you don't know. But I remember early on in my career just being so afraid to not
And I'm
know.
glad you said that a second time, because I was going to harp on it the first time you said it. One of, we're all dads here. And one of the things I try to instill in my kids all the time is that word fear. And one of the benefits I had, that I think was a huge benefit of the Marine Corps, was the fact that it eliminated fear from my life. Now, it's not like I can still feel like I can walk through a brick wall and like they brainwashed you, but they helped you to understand that there's a couple things that you go through when you're at boot camp and this and that. You look left and right and you realize the other 71 guys are just like you. They're afraid of the same things you're afraid of. They have to do the same things that you have to do. They're not quite sure how to do it. And so you really have to overcome that idea of being, in fear. I mean, we all have our own companies. I'm sure you guys are like me. You wake up. If the phone doesn't ring in 3 days, I'm like, what the hell? Am I going out of business? What's going on here? And then I look at like my little project board I have, and I said, okay, the phone doesn't have to ring for 6 months, and I'm good. But if it doesn't ring in 3 days, I'm like calling builders and saying, hey, how's it going? Hey, any word on like that project? Is that coming on? And it's like, Steve, you shouldn't be worried about it. But overcoming that fear is huge. And you said that it's glad that you weren't afraid to ask that question. Well, I think fear works in both ways, right? I'm certainly not afraid to ask that question of what a domino is, but I'm certainly not afraid tomorrow of posting another Instagram post not knowing what the hell this detail truly is, or what kind of glue did we use there.
Exactly. And that's super important, and I think a lot of people should be more open to that, because that's how you're self-educating at that point.
Well, I think a lot of people don't do a lot of things because of fear, or don't post things because of fear, because of what somebody else may say, and it almost paralyzes them in a sense.
Yeah. I talked to Benny about it. Benny's like, I don't have the knowledge you have. I don't want to post. And I keep saying to him, I go, someone's in the exact same place you are, and they need to know that someone else is with them.
Dude, I love when Benny posts. I get so
seriously.
I'm like, yeah. I'm like,
I was just right on it that I think somebody stole his phone.
Like revelation. I can remember, when my kids were real young, my son, I coached his baseball team, and it probably wasn't the best idea for me to volunteer to be the head coach. But anyways, we had this one kid, and he always stepped out of the batter's box. And I tried to get in his head. It's like, Johnny, you're never going to hit the ball, because you're not even in there. You can't reach the damn ball. You got to stay in the batter's box. But pitcher would wind up, he'd throw that left foot out, step out of the batter's box, and then reach for a swing and totally miss it. So we're at practice one time. I'm throwing batting practice. He comes up to bat. I said, wait a minute. And I put a...
throwing heat.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I used to throw heat. My son used to take his glove off, and his hand would be red. But I said it builds character. But anyways, so this kid comes up the bat, and I said, wait a minute. I go and I get one of those big trash cans, roll it over, and I put it behind him. And the mom's like, what are you doing? What are you doing? I said, he's never going to hit the ball. He's got to overcome this fear. Fear is our worst nemesis. Well, I put the barrel behind him, threw a few in there. He couldn't back out of the batter's box, and he was forced to swing. And when he hit the ball and actually made contact, it was like a highlight of my life to see the look on this kid's face, to say, that's all I needed to do. I needed to stay in there on the pitch. And it's like, that's a life lesson, right? It's like, if you want to be successful, all three of us want to be successful. When I lecture, I back builders. I've learned to kind of paint them into the corner that they can't come out of. So I'll walk into a room, the 100 builders, and say, are there any builders here that are building to code, that are striving to be the most mediocre, lowest bid builder in the room? Of course, nobody's hand goes up, right? But what I've done now is I've totally eliminated the conversation about you can't do that or people won't pay for that. It's like, you just told me you're the professional and that you're striving to be the best builder in town. So let's talk about how to do that. Let's get over that fear of people can't do this, can't do that. And I love to tell the story of Jake. And Jake came to me like 6 years ago, just called me out of the blue, said, hey, I got a client that wants to build a passive house. And I know you've done a couple and this and that. And I was like, sure, bring them up. He's like, we can come up there, and I'm like, yeah, come on up. I have like 2 or 3 of them all down on the Cape. I said we can go and visit them. So anyways, he brought that up. We never built that house. That client went on to different pastures, thank God. But the reality is he's down there in nowhere, Missouri, and I can say that jokingly because I've been there. But he has people calling him and saying, hey, I saw this article and I see you on Instagram and you seem to be the kind of guy that we want you to build our house. It's not, hey, how much do you charge? How much do you build a square foot for? It's the conversation of, how do we get you to be the builder for our house? And I think that's the goal. And for me, it's the same way, right? It's not, how much do you charge? Can I get you to whip up some plans for me cheap? It's like, how do I get you to be the architect for my job? And I think those are, that's what we're all striving for. And we got to get over that fear. When I did the first passive house, I know I'm taking over the conversation here, but you talk about fear.
It's your show, man.
Well, you talk about fear. So I got turned on to this one client, and I could talk about this client because it's actually a really interesting story. At least I think so. But I get turned on to this client, and we're sitting in his house and we're talking, and he's like, yeah, I'm thinking about building a passive house. And this is like 11, 12 years ago at this point. And it's like, he goes, I know your experience in efficient homes and stuff. Are you comfortable? Do you think we can do it and become certified and this and that? And when I sit here and say, I had no idea what the hell passive house was, right? Like literally about 30 seconds after he asked, like, do you think you can do a passive house? I just said, hey, do you mind if I'm just going to hit the powder room here? I'll be right back. I went in there and I'm freaking Googling passive house to try and understand what the hell is this guy talking about? And it's like, okay, building standard. Yeah, we can do that. Okay. There's some limitations, but hey, and it goes back to that. When you're standing in the ranks of the Marine Corps, I look left and right and realize, hey, we're all the same. Well, it's the same thing there. He asked, can you do that passive house? Well, I look left and right and I see all the other architects and I say to myself, I'm just as smart as they are. I might not have done one, but I certainly have the confidence to understand I can figure it out and build one.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right, and that's that. I think that's a huge leap for all of us. Is like Tyler was saying, is you got to get rid of that F word, and you just got to weed it out of your life, and you have to have the ability to fail, right, and take that. But it's really not failure. We hear the cliche. It's like Edison never failed. He just figured out how to build a light bulb 1,000 times until it actually worked, right? Or 100 times, whatever that cliche is. But it's the same. People say, "What's your favorite project?" I say, "I don't know. I haven't done it yet." And they're like, "What do you mean you haven't done it yet?" I said, "Well, it should be the last one I ever do, because that one has the most knowledge embedded in it, right?"
I mean, I get stuck on the point where if you get on a roof and you think about falling off, you'll never do the task at hand. But if you go up there and think about what you have to get done and not about the height, you're on level ground. But if you let that fear overwhelm you, you'll never make the right decisions. You'll never get what you need to get done. And at the end of the day, you'll probably get hurt. And that's how I approach it.
We were talking about it, and I'll relate to that. I'll bring it back to the Marine Corps. And it's like, I a lot of my life revolved around it. And, people that have been around me for a while know that it was a huge hinge point in my life where I turned it. But when you talk about being on the roof, if I'm not going to go up there, then I'll never be able to do my job. Well, in the Marine Corps, they don't brainwash you, but they get you to understand that you have a certain duty, you have a certain mission. Because at some point in your career, you might be asked to pull a trigger, and you don't have a second chance to think about that, right? I know it's hardcore. I know it's really out there compared to what we're talking about building, but it does relate. We all have certain jobs to do, and we have to be prepared to do those jobs. And if we don't do those jobs and we're afraid of it, we're never going to be able to do it, whatever it is, whether it's climbing a roof, pulling a trigger, or stamping a set of drawings. Hell, I think I had to change my pants the first time I sent out a stamped set of drawings, right? The first time I stamped them and signed them and sent it out, it's like, oh my God, am I going to get sued? Am I going to, is the roof going to cave in? It's like all these scenarios start going through your head, and you're scared shitless. And it's like, Steve, it was a family room addition. Let's not get carried away here, right?
Well, it's people say that all the time. It's if everyone's like, well, what happens if what if this happens? What if that? It's like, stop focusing on that. What if it doesn't happen?
Yeah.
What if it doesn't? What if everything goes to exactly as planned? Focus on that.
The what ifs are for the minimum building code.
Or what?
People that are trying to skirt by.
What if I jump off that cliff and soar like an eagle and I don't hit the bottom, right?
I think that's a little less likely,
debatable.
But
work with me here, Tyler, please.
Steve, we got like 10 questions or so. I actually didn't count them, but I would like to do a rapid fire if you're up.
We got 100.
Yeah.
Quick 100.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Not a problem, man. I love it.
All right, so I'm gonna go in order of getting them. So how do I get projects from big companies like yours, or even internships?
Well, first of all, I think it's funny. People say, "Oh my God!" I get these posts all the time. Like, "Oh, I could probably not afford you." It's like, whoa, wait a minute. I'm like a third the cost of a lot of architects. But how do I get big jobs? I think when I sit down and look for a builder, I look for honesty. People say, "Oh, well, you do passive houses. This builder really isn't one that he's never built a passive house." I don't care if he's ever built a passive house. I care that he's an honest guy with an open mind. And most importantly, like Johnny said, he's willing to listen. Shut your mouth for 5 minutes, because I probably have something worth saying. And just like you're going to respect my time, I'm actually going to respect your time. Because if you've been a builder for 20 years and you never did a passive house, I don't care. But and I will listen. But I think, the way that it's like anything, the way you get better and become more successful is making yourself a more successful person. Be honest, be truthful, be confident in your answers. If you don't know the answer, you know what? That's a valid answer. I don't know. I've stood in front of 150 people in a conference, and somebody asked me a question, and I say, I don't know the answer to that. But what I do know is I know the person that does. And if you send me an email, I'll send you the right answer. Right? So it's just about being truthful.
Cool. Next one. What are some healthy home practices, or healthy home in air quotes, practices that you recommend? I'm seeing a lot more of this from our clients.
So I'm certainly an advocate that houses can't be too tight. But, when people get all wrapped up in, oh my God, you got formaldehyde, or you got this, the plywood is going to off gas, or the Advantech or something like that. And I think, Johnny, you hit this a couple months ago in a podcast, and you were spot on. But I'm more afraid of what you as a client use to clean your house, and what kind of furniture you bring in that has fire retardants and all this stuff. Like, put that stuff out in the garage for a week, let it air out before you bring it into that house. But I've had many clients, people say, oh, you don't want it too tight. I've actually had clients that say, we had really bad asthma and now we're in this house and we love it. Dan Roy, one of my favorite clients, passive house down on the Cape. He'll be the first one to tell you he hates leaving his house because the inside of his house is the best environment he knows.
That's awesome.
So true.
Does architecture have a closed culture, and could it benefit from a more open one?
I think in the sense that it has a closed culture in that architects out of probably most professions have a huge fear of being wrong or not having the answer. Like, as an architect, I should know that. And it's like to stand up in front of the crowd and say, yeah, I really don't know that. Or, yeah, I don't know how to frame that. There's been many times I climb up on a roof and sit on the rafters with the framers and say, oh, so how do you figure out like that compound angle on how this hip comes into the ridge and you actually have two cuts? And they go through it and they're like, why do you care? And I was like, good, I'm just trying to understand like how you do your job. If I can understand that, it can make me a little bit better. But I think architects are some of the biggest babies, if you will, and biggest fear. Like we can't say we're wrong. We can't say we don't know. There's this, and part of it is, I don't know if you guys understand like the true profession of architecture, but it used to be called the gentleman's profession, right? So in the 1800s, you were a rich family. It's, you send your son over to Paris, he goes to the Beaux Arts, he gets an education, he comes back and he's called an architect. It's like, yeah, that's what rich people do with their sons, right? They send them over there, they get some European education, and then they come back to America and they're the gentlemen of gentlemen because they're an architect. So there's this kind of instilled notion like they don't know or they can't figure it out. And it's interesting because I admittingly like to have some fun with some architects. Like, I'll just ask them some questions and certainly bait them, and they'll try and like lie their way out of it. And I'm like, buddy, I know where you're going with this, and that is so wrong on the building science side. But you go right ahead and try again. Put another nickel in, try again. We'll go for it. But
how do we get more architects to be as focused as Steve on water and air sealing details?
I think it's important. And just so like I talked about earlier with the responsibility of, executing or having my daughter understand what her expectations are, but her also having me understand what my expectations are. If you're a really good builder, I think you need to ask the architect. It's like, hey, we're putting in these windows. I would really like to have you out there, for an hour or something on Tuesday just to review how we're going to install these, and force them to come out. Flip it back on them. Now they might say, oh, I'm too busy, I'm this and that. But I think the wisest ones would say, you know what, that might be a good idea if we go out there and get on the same page. When I do a project, I've installed a bunch of windows, and even some of the same builders. I get the Huber rep out there. I get the window rep. I get Ken Kiefer from Siega out there. We throw a big party. We make the builder buy coffee and donuts. But we install a window together, and then we look. I go around the table and say, are you guys all happy with the way that window was installed? And when they say, yeah, I said, okay. Now we're prepared to do the other 42. But if I was a builder, I would be putting so much pressure on architects, and I wouldn't give them that little hole in the corner that once they paint themselves into the corner that they can back out of the room. I'd call them on it and say, come out there and join us, and not call them on it in a mean way. Just say, I think it's a really great idea if we can grow together and grow our relationship. If we understand what we're both doing, because some of these details, I don't think you understand the hardship that you're imposing on us as builders. And if you come out there, then maybe I can explain a few things that can, change this around, make you a better person and make me a better builder.
Steve, I actually have a handful. There's quite a bit of very specific building science questions, and I'm actually going to skip them. And I'd like to ask if a lot of these guys can reach out to you directly, and if so, what's the best way to do that?
You could just direct message me, but you got to follow me first, and you got to vote for me in the Sweet 16 or Sweet 8 for Kansas City, and then you can direct message me. But it.
What's your handle on Instagram?
It's Stephen Baczek Architect, and it's funny because I'll get somebody and I'll post something. Somebody will initialize a conversation, and then, bing, my phone goes off. 3 messages from XYZ builder in Texas. It's like, hey Steve, I'm building this house. Can I send you a picture of the wall section? I got some questions. I get it all the time. My phone all the time. So,
but you're open.
And I'm
to it.
totally open to it. You know, don't waste my time.
Yeah, I think
I'm certainly up for helping the industry.
Yeah, reading these, I'm like, this is a podcast in itself. Some of these questions. So I want to end it. On Drew Dog came up. The last question I got was the hardest thing that you face starting out in your business.
I guess
John's holding his breath.
Well, yeah.
I was trying to guess in my head.
I think patience is the key. And I say
like
that in everybody wants to come out of the chute and they want to do the 5,000 square foot modern farmhouse with custom cabinetry and all kinds of great designs. But the reality, I think, to get there is...
I took a shot right there. I feel like you're aiming that one at me.
No, not at all. Not at all. But I think, and like I said, I still do it. And here, I'll let you in on another truth. You know what my biggest moneymaker is? If someone asks me, hey, can you draw up plans for a 2-stall garage? Dude, I could do that in 3 hours, charge $1,500. Bang it out. Cut and paste.
Done.
And be done. But
I'll take a 3-car garage, if you don't mind.
But I think
1,800.
I think patience is the key. And patience and honesty, I think, play a kind of hand-in-hand role. Like, you have to be patient. The good jobs will come, but they're only going to come if you're honest about what you're doing. So, you know, set your company on a trajectory that is real. Don't try and give yourself false hopes. And I mean, even now, it's like you would think, oh, every project you do must be something, you know, you're cantilevering this, doing that, passive house. No. I get some people down the street that want a family room and a, you know, farmer's porch across the front, and we bang it out. And so I'm still constantly reminding myself, it's like, be patient. It always comes through. That next project's going to come through. That one, you know, maybe someday I'll get that project with Johnny or Nick, and that will come through. But I have to be patient for that. I can't push it. It will come. And, you know, if I haven't said it to you guys, there's a lot of people out there listening that I'm sure I say that, oh, I can't wait to do a project. I said, be patient. Our paths will cross sooner or later. You know, they will.
Well, Steve, I know I speak for all of us. Sincerely appreciate you spending almost 3 hours with us tonight, and for everything you kind of do for the industry and your approach to it. You know, you can definitely see your wild sense of humor in some of the YouTube and Instagram, but you've brought tremendous, you know, value to the educating our industry.
Yeah, no, thank you. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to come out and talk, and it's always fun, always fun.
And a real quick plug. What's going on with your podcast? What give us a rundown.
So it's called the Unbuild It Podcast. It's Jake Bruton, who's a builder, myself as the architect, and Peter Yost, who's a nationally recognized building scientist. It's really exciting for me. And what's funny is, if I don't know the answer, my next call is to Peter, because Peter knows freaking everybody. Like, I can call him with a paint question or a wood question. He's like, oh, I don't know, but let me call my friend John. He's, you know, one of the project managers at the Wood Council. It's like, yeah, of course you know him, and we'll get an answer on, you know, why that mold is growing on that paint or whatever it is. But it's 3 guys that have a common road, but we have a different set of filters and different approaches on how to get to the same place. Like, we want to get to the same place. We want to build good buildings, but we all have slightly different approaches, and we're friends. So, I have to remind them every time before we go on and tape a podcast. I remind both of them. I said, listen, you guys are really good friends now. You will be really good friends after the podcast. Please ignore everything I say between now and that moment, because it's the Howard Stern in me that I'll make that joke about Peter being old or something. But the podcast, it's I think it's very valuable, because in this world of quick information, I see as much bad information as I see good information. And one of the things I always get too is when I'm at a conference speaking, and some friends will come up, or people that know me, they'll break open the schedule and be like, oh, well, who would you go listen to? Right? And I'll be like, okay, this one, avoid him, avoid her, listen to this guy, definitely do not miss this guy, and this guy, go in there and ask him this question, and he'll know why you're in there, because I sent you. But there's tons of information out there, and getting the right information, I think, is key. And I think the one thing about the three of us is we're pretty honest that if I say if we don't know it, but the reality is if Peter doesn't know it, then we can certainly find out the answer, because he just basically baffles me on, like, we'll talk about Windows or something, and he'll get into like the coefficient of this and that label, and it's like, Peter, I really don't care. I care what the U value is. I don't really care how they calculated in the derivative of the U value. I really don't care about that. But yeah, and my Instagram, I try and put some stuff on there. Occasionally I throw up a polished photo just because I need people to understand, okay, he's an architect that actually does some pretty decent work. But most of the stuff I throw up there is, hey, here's where we did an air barrier the right way, or here's where we did insulation the right way, or did this or did that. And I think you guys are aware, but I'm also doing some videos with Matt, and I actually just recorded 4 of them this morning, and they were basically on wall framing, floor framing, and roof framing. And I talked about what's a bird's mouth, what's a seat cut, what's a plumb cut, what's a square cut on a rafter. And it's like,
I mean, he's building an awesome library it's the Build Show network, right?
Yeah. And so I'm thinking about, okay, some people might look at this, and framers might look at this and go, okay, Steve, we know what the hell a bird's mouth is. I get that. But does the kid that just graduated architecture school that's watching this video, does he know what a square cut or a plumb cut is? And, since we started doing the podcast, I don't know how much you guys get into. I know Johnny had made mention of listening to other podcasts, but so I started listening to podcasts that talk about podcasts and being successful in social media. And one of them that I was listening to, I can't remember the guy's name, but he's the one that started Masterclass, I think, because he was ranting and raving about that. But he was talking about something like 70% of our education now is self-taught over the internet. Like, people don't buy a cookbook. If you want to learn how to make shrimp scampi, you go online, you watch the YouTube video, or you put your laptop in the kitchen and you cook right there with Emerald, right? And you get that world class.
Emerald, guys.
Bam.
Wow.
Bam.
It's like, bang. Hey, I hope you like the shrimp scampi. That's Emerald's recipe, right? It's
just dated yourself, my
yeah,
friend.
That's all right. But
is he alive still?
Yeah.
Yeah,
but
sure.
it's true. And
I think he has a master class.
But the other thing that this...
He uses Ken's salad dressing.
The other, hey, listen, I got a salad dressing question or story for you, too, that we'll close out with, I promise. But the the statistic that this guy said is that social media is closing in on $1 billion a day industry. Which, think about that for a minute, right? That there's $1 billion tied to education on social media. It's crazy. And yes, I am dating myself. If I ask my son something, like, we'll be in a car and he'll be like, hey, what's this? Or I'll ask him, what's that? Bang. he's on his phone and he goes to find the answer, and he's like, he'll watch a YouTube video or whatever, and he gives me the answer. It's like, that's how they're programmed to understand, and I think Matt's doing a really good job with that. But anyways, Tyler, years ago, probably like 10, 15, I'm at Disney World down in Florida. We're at one of their hotels. My youngest daughter and I go down to the pool so she can go swimming, and she orders a salad, and they give her a little tube of Ken's Steakhouse salad dressing. And I had just started working with the family at that point, and I'm sitting there thinking to myself, here I am poolside remotely in a hotel at Disney, and they're handing me a Ken's Steakhouse salad dressing. It's like they must have 3 or 4 trucks backing up to Disney World alone every day, just dropping off condiments. It's like, you want to talk about
add a
success.
zero.
That's
add a zero to your contract.
Yeah, exactly. That's crazy. But hey, we talked about mine, but I just want to speak for myself. I commend you guys on what you're doing. I certainly get entertained. I love talking to hearing the stories of these guys like the Gary Katz and talking about the ups and downs. And I'm really big on trying to understand how to be successful. And most of my reading is tuned to that kind of stuff. Is how did successful people get successful, and trying to understand.
I think it's always fascinating, no matter what. The story's always different.
They're stories. Hey, Johnny, hockey question for you. Do you know why the best hockey players are born in January or February?
No.
You never heard this outlier story? So a kid that's born in January or February, as opposed to the kid that's born in August, right? He makes a certain cut on the fall age line, right? So that
I was the August guy.
Yeah. So if you're the January guy, you're 6 months older than the kid that you're playing on the team. So now when they go across there and they have the A team, B team, and C team, the A team is mostly, and this is statistically correct, the A team is mostly January and February kids, especially at the younger age. So what does that do to them? That puts them on the best team. The best team gets the best coach. They get the best ice time, and they see the better opponents. So the better kids get even more better, and the worse kids are the August, July kids are forced to suffer.
So you heard it here, more better.
More better.
I believe it.
More better.
I believe it. I guess I broke that
Well, there you go.
stigma.
I mean, there are.
Yeah, I tried.
There's exceptions
There's
to
a few
every
of us.
rule. And we'll just leave
Damn
that
right.
one with you there, Johnny.
Thank you.
But hey, I'm going to make a final plug. You guys got to have me back on, because I never got to my we're losing craftsmanship discussion with Johnny.
Yeah, this was just part one.
Yeah.
How many parts did you signed up for? A bunch, right?
I'll come back. I don't care. I can talk about this stuff all day, every day.
He only signed up
what
for
are you guys
one.
doing tomorrow night? Believe it or not, tomorrow night I have another podcast. So, hey.
Oh,
Now, Steve,
humble
really
brag.
appreciate it, and we will definitely. I'll send you that calendar thing again, so we can get you scheduled again and see if we can get something teed up relatively quickly, so we can follow up to this, because I know you did leave a lot of stones left unturned. So
Yeah,
but either
only
way,
if that background image is a complete image.
I'll show you that. I'll show you the inside of the room. It's actually pretty cool.
all right, man.
Thank
Have a
you.
good night. Thank you so
All right.
much.
Thanks, gentlemen.
All right, guys. So, again, thank you to Huber for sponsoring this podcast. If you want more information on Steve Baczek, you can find him on Instagram, the Unbuild It podcast, on the Build Show Network with Matt Reisinger, or StephenBaczekArchitect.com. Really appreciate you listening. And then we want to dig into a little bit about, Tyler, you did a webinar today, right?
We did, or I did. I was with Fine Home Building. They got a hold of me super last minute last week, 2 weeks ago, and they basically just wanted to, with everything that's going on in work kind of coming to a halt for a lot of people, to continue to educate and get knowledge and experience out there. So it was just a question and answer for an hour online today, basically about some of our process and insight and tools that go into on-site finishing. So it was just Go ahead.
And a great follow up to the 70% of education is happening online, and obviously, like you said, a lot of people are trapped at home. They're looking to take this opportunity to expand their education. Is there a plan for future?
I think we may try and do a couple of more. I know that they did record the Zoom meeting, so they're going to be posting that on their website. I don't have the details on that. I think he said within 24 hours or so, but it was a quick hour. Basically, there were questions coming in. Justin was feeding me them, and I was getting out answers as quickly as I can, just to give a little bit of insight as to what I do.
And that was free, right?
Yeah, free registration.
That was awesome.
Yeah,
webinars have been awesome.
Yeah, I think the whole point is that there's not a lot of fresh content out there with everything that's going on in work slowing down. So they're trying to create some content that could be useful and helpful for some people.
Speaking of content, John, you switched up this week.
I popped my cherry, and I jumped on YouTube.
Better you than someone else,
right? Yeah, so I jumped on YouTube. Nick and I, we've talked about it a lot over the years, and I finally made the plunge and wanted to document projects start to finish. So we're doing that right now with our East Coast custom renovation, and we'll be launching another one that will be the Patina Farmhouse from start to finish, both renos. Well, one's a new construction and one's a reno, and we'll document the whole process all the way through. We'll probably drop those every other week. So you can find it on Vintage Builders on YouTube.
Sweet. And we changed up the format of our video, actually a lot to do with a conversation John and I had right after a podcast. And we went back to the original Tuckerman videos, kind of watched what was fun about them. I mean, man, we put a lot of time into this first one. And we jokingly talked about it before, is how I was going to hold on to sharing it. And it was literally 4 hours later. I'm like, yeah, it's up. Like we gotta share this. So
as soon as it edits the way you want it, you hold on to it for like a half a second. You're like, you know what? Like I have one right now that's done. It's episode 2 of the Patina Farmhouse. We haven't edited the first one, and I'm like, I could do it out of sequence. Like, I could drop that.
I think it'll be nice for you, John, especially just because your projects can seem to fly with all that's going on. And all the moving parts, so I think it'll be nice if you can slow that down some and kind of see what goes into it, just because it goes quickly.
It's also
a little bit of a snapshot into the day-to-day.
It's so fun to see it, after you finish that first one, then you like revamp the way you film the next one. And it just becomes like, that's why a big reason why Doug is, with us full time. He now understands the process, so he's capturing the steps necessary so we can become more efficient. I mean, this one, he probably, he told me how many megabytes or gigabytes I had of footage, but it was a lot. And he was like, now I know that none of that was necessary, and I can, take what, the next time we can be more efficient with it. But it's just I think video is just so fun.
It is cool. I mean, it makes you, to talk about Steve a little bit, Baczek, it makes you think about your approach to the process and how streamlined can you detail it in a video without the ahs and the ums and all that stuff, and be direct enough, but be solid with what your approach is. And, I'm doing it a little different than Nick is, we're doing it on a GoPro drone. When I'm on site, I'm quickly doing it and getting my content across, and I'm dumping that into a Google Drive, and someone else is editing that off reservation. And
it's super efficient.
Yeah, I'm just trying to. I'm not going to lie to you. There's a lot of people out there, like Steve said, putting out content, and it's either not accurate, it's for promotional factors, or just to kind of be popular. And that's not why any of us are doing what we're doing. And that's why I don't have time, but I figured. I mean, obviously the Patina Farmhouse is a once in a lifetime build, so I had to capture that, where we're breaking ground on a 4 acre lot that we cleared from scratch. So why not document how we put our stamp on this earth? It was cool.
Yeah, it'll be neat, especially I think it's tough with the video, it's going to help get a feel for what your whole project is, because I think that on Instagram you're posting snapshots, you're posting single pictures or a quick clip, and it's tough to even see, from one room to another what that entire house feels like. So it'll be cool to be able to get that entire cohesive feel of the build and kind of see it progress and come to fruition.
I've been fighting this for a long time. I think the Lathrop custom we did years ago, I made its own IG so you could follow that build.
Yeah.
Where on IG it gets so convoluted with all the other posts that you're doing with other projects that you can't follow along. So
no, it's impossible.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, you guys know where to find us. We will see you next week. Oh, actually, wait.
No, we got reviews, bro.
All right, you do a review.
We got new mics. It's from Wednesday. Thank God for the new mics, you guys. Amazon 5-star audio now. Keep up the great work.
Awesome. No, I mean, dude, the mics have made a huge difference.
I listened to it too. It sounded phenomenal.
We got our ish together. We are systemized ish. But no, I agree. I think the mics, they were long overdue. We all knew that.
We knew it.
And it was just, and it finally, I'm glad someone wrote something about it. But also next week we got Kyle Macht from Macht Architecture, which is a cool follow up to Steve.
Yeah.
Because he's building science, passive house, health in building. He's talking about carbon footprint. So I think we'll geek out a little bit next week on building science, which we didn't touch on with Steve this week.
I like it.
Me too.
We actually have three other reviews, all from yesterday.
All right.
One of them's from your boy, dude.
Which boy?
Born Imagery.
Oh, Dave.
Yeah, dude.
He was on the webinar today.
I saw that. He posted on it. Yeah, I'm not going to read it, Nick.
Okay.
This is your gig, baby.
I don't have them pulled up. I'm sitting over here thinking I got off the hook. Hold on a second. I'm just going to chatter until I scroll down to the bottom of the thing, press the button.
Well, it's always
two
good.
hairs like opposite right now.
What's
John's
that?
is your hair. Both of your hairs basically opposite. John's is just straight up. Nick's is
all right. Dave, these guys. Mine? Thank you.
Yeah,
look at Nick. As soon as you directed it to him, he's like,
so
what's up?
Nick's lighting makes him look like he's been tanning.
Totally.
Well, I got a sunburn.
He's got a filter.
I went for a walk the other day. I got sunburned.
Like a cherry.
Thanks. I know this light's not that great.
Mine kept going out.
There we go.
I had to plug it in.
All right. Born Imagery, these guys always deliver. It's frustrating when one of your favorite podcasts isn't consistent with the release date, and the Modern Craftsman always deliver. Oftentimes, I listen to it Sunday night, and it brings back many great memories of being in the business. I enjoy the diversity of the guests and the pointed questions. If you're in remodeling in the building world, this podcast should be in your library. Dave West. If you guys don't know, he was actually on the podcast a couple episodes ago and talked about why he left remodeling and got into photography. And we also have another one.
Night of my
blowout.
blowout.
Man, there's a few.
Two more.
Always from Elegance Custom Cabinetry. Always when I listen to you guys, feel like I'm not alone up there. Thank you guys for the hard work and doing that. And then from Colton, recently took over the family general contracting business as a young guy, and it's been a huge transition. I've worked for a large production builder for about a half a year and as an APM all through college. I've struggled to find good guidance and information, but the Modern Craftsman makes me feel like they're talking to just me, and they're so open about everything, from tips and techniques to the mental health of our profession and being an owner-operator. These guys keep it real. Lost my grandfather who started the company just a few weeks ago, and I look forward to Mondays to hear the real content of the industry from you guys. Keep on sharing, Colton. Colton, very sorry for your loss, but really appreciate the honest feedback.
Thanks, man. You guys can go to iTunes, 5-star review, leave a review. We'll give it a read. It always helps bump us up in the standings, and more people see us, so you're actually sharing the podcast to others with a good review.
With that being said, see you next week.